Hello, everyone, and welcome to Chillin with the Villain, the classic wrestling review podcast where we sit down, chill out, and watch some classic wrestling, then review it for you, the I used to watch wrestling types. Today's show, we take it back to WCW Thunder, April 26th, 2000. You might be asking yourself, what is significant about this show? Well, Russo's booking is running wild. The New Bloods and the Millionaires Club feud dominates the storylines. Tammy, otherwise known as Sunny, shows off her wrestling abilities, or lack of. Table bumps are galore, and a Hollywood actor becomes the world heavyweight champion. Who could it be? Who? All this and much more. But before we move on, allow me to introduce myself. I am the villain, Marty Skell, pro wrestling veteran, globe trotter, but most importantly, a massive wrestling fan. Joining me today, he's one of those I used to watch wrestling types, but he's watching a wrestling again just for your entertainment. He is the producer of Chillin with the Villain. He is my co-host, Sir Samuel Scott. Hello, Sam. How are you?
Hello, Marty. I am well, thank you very much. I'm on my come down now after watching that episode again last night. So I'm feeling a lot more calm.
Are you talking about today's episode or Survivor Series 2002?
Oh no, that was a different kind of energy.
Well, we are bringing the energy today because
for
the first time on Chilling with the Villain, we're going to WCW. Not just WCW, but WCW in the year 2000. Ooh. See, last week we watched a pay-per-view and people really seemed to enjoy the show. They really did. But the thing is, we watched the show and it's pretty much, I'm talking about Survivor Series 2002, and it's pretty much flawless. So when it comes to review it, it's kind of like, this match happened, that was good. This match happened as well. That was also good. This match was excellent. And it's kind of like, I feel like we need something more to, what's the word I'm looking for? Not berate, but, like we want something that's not all good. And I was like, you know what? We'll take it in the whole other direction.
We know where to go for that, yeah.
WCW 2000. But just following up on last week's show, did you enjoy it last week, Sam?
Survivor Series 02 or our episode of the podcast going over Survivor Series 02?
Both.
Yeah, it was a very interesting pay-per-view because, again, I kind of dipped out during that time frame. So revisiting that, it was interesting to see what I did miss. Like you said, it was... I was going to say, like you said, you never said this, I'm putting words in your mouth, but it was almost too good to review. It makes, like, we didn't have much to say about the actual card itself because it was just staggering. But I'm super glad that won out in the end in the poll. I feel like you may feel a bit different, but what about now after you've recorded it? You changed your mind?
I want to do Uncensored 95.
Still do.
I want to do King of the Ring 93. I want to do Halloween Havoc 1993. But the good news is that we're doing this podcast forever. We're doing it and we're never going to stop. Forever. That's a Terry Funk reference, by the way, Sam. You probably don't know that. I'll have to show you that video. But it seems like the majority of people really enjoyed the show last week. And
super good reviews, yeah.
Yes, Sam and I, we love your feedback. We want your feedback. This is the first time I've ever had my own podcast. This is the first time Sam has ever done anything like this. Most of these shows, Sam's watching for the first time. So we want to get better. We want to grow. We don't think that we're amazing already, but, we're doing this for you, the people. So we would really like your feedback and tell us how we can grow. Tell us how we can get better. So looking at the comments, if you're not following us on Instagram already, please do @TheVillainPod. It is going down on Instagram. We're posting on there numerous times a day and we're having a lot of fun and growing a community. What would I call the Chillin' with the Villain fans? The chillers? What would you call
the
them?
Chillers? The Podlets?
They're all chilling with the villain either way. I got a message on the Instagram account from Stitch Redman. Hello, Stitch Redman. He said, Marty, this is really interesting, by the way. He said, Marty, you mentioned about if Paul Heyman was in a movie, he'd be exactly like his wrestling persona. He was in the 2002 remake of Rollerball with LL Cool J and Chris Klein. He was an announcer, basically very similar to his commentator years at WWE. All hail the villain, umbrella emoji. Have you ever seen that movie before?
I have. It's not very good.
Oh, why didn't you bring this up last week?
I completely forgot about that.
You did? You're the movie buff on this
Yeah,
podcast,
I completely forgot about that. Well, thanks, Stitch, because I absolutely forgot about that. Well, I wonder how many more times we're going to do this where we're going to say, oh, I wish these what if scenarios, and someone's going to respond in the comments, what do you mean what if?
Well, we would
already happened.
Right. We would like to review some wrestling movies at some point. So let us know if that's something you guys are interested in.
Tell us what wrestling movies we should cover as well, because there's some straightforward ones. We don't want to get into too many spoilers for future episodes today. If you want to join the link between what we're watching now and perhaps another movie in the future, it's not too difficult. But there's some more obscure ones as well that might be interesting to cover, but then again, people might not care at all.
I've got 2 words, Sam. Backyard Dogs.
Never heard of it.
That's what it's called, right? Backyard Dogs? The Backyard Wrestling movie?
No, I've never heard of it.
Yes, you have. Yeah, Backyard Dogs. It's got the guy from Power Rangers in it.
No, I've never heard of this in my life.
Oh, okay. We need to review Backyard Dogs and your mind's going to be blown. Anyway, getting on to feedback. Got a message from a fellow wrestler, Tom Phillip. He said, effing loving your podcast, learning stuff even from a worker's point of view. So there we go. I think that's pretty cool that if you're a wrestler listening to this podcast, you might learn a bit from the villain's wisdom. Been doing this now, what have I been doing it? 18, maybe 20 years. So I'd like to think that I'm giving back to the industry with my knowledge. So thank you, Tom. We got a message or a comment from Menzies 1985. The crowd was so behind Steiner on this show. Yet, a few months later, he ended up well down the card. Triple H must have been responsible in a way. I actually replied to him on this. Maybe I should have saved it for the pod. But I don't think it's really fair to blame his WWE run on Triple H. I mean, I guess they could have pushed him despite his performances, but if he wasn't all there in the ring and he couldn't perform like he used to, I don't think it's really fair to blame it on Triple H personally.
No, in any other line of work, if you're not good enough, you're out at those upper echelons. Why would wrestling be any different?
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of fair.
Yeah, but, we appreciate your comment. I got one here from VL7N_Seattle. He said, underrated card outside of the main event. Anything with Victoria in her prime was fantastic. And that triple threat tag team match was great. Good call. And then the Stitch Redman is back in here again. He says, great spot on Trish standing on the mirror and breaking it. Loving the pod. So I didn't even notice this. You did, where Trish broke the mirror.
Yeah, it's just a theory, but it does kind of make sense if you think about it. I wonder if anybody really knows what happened apart from the people involved in the production.
I'm sure.
I hope we find it. I hate a mystery. I'm one of those people. I'd have to find out.
Do you think it'd be really weird if I messaged Lisa Marie and asked her about it? She'd be like, why are you asking me about this match that I had 25 years ago?
Let's give it more time. Let's see if us and the Podlets can
figure
it out ourselves. Yeah.
You're going with the Podlets. I'm going with the Chillers.
Oh, the Podlets is awful. I'm just going to run with it for now. Christopher Michaels says solid stuff. Keep them coming. Andy Whitaker gave some insight to the tables and the TLC and the rules that we had. Okay. That discussion from last week. So with regards to the TLC match and how you can really tighten that up, he said, wouldn't it not be cool to do it more like the TNA King of the Mountain match, which I'm not familiar with? Mm-hmm. But in this case, you have to put someone through a table before you can even climb the ladder to grab the title. And chairs are the only other weapon allowed. What do you reckon about that?
I wouldn't call that tightening it up. I think that's probably making... The more rules you apply to something, the more kind of confusing it is. You kind of want it to be as simple as possible, but it would make the rules of a TLC match make more sense. Because it's funny, my little brother messaged me and he said, oh, he's like a very casual fan of wrestling, like very casual fan. He said, I thought you could lose a TLC match by going for a table. And I said, no, you can't. He said, well, what the hell is the difference between a ladder match then and a TLC match? I was like, yeah, that was kind of our point. So the idea of that, having to go for a table before climbing the ladder, yes, I guess it would make the T part of TLC make more sense, but at the same time, I don't know. The King of the Mountain match was, I remember this, it was normally multi-man matches. It was in TNA. And yeah, you had to put someone for a table, I want to say, before you be able to climb the ladder, but you didn't grab the belt. You put the belt back up. And not only that, but when you went for a table, you would be put in like a cage and you'd be in there for like 2 minutes.
Like a timeout.
Like a penalty box, yeah. There's some things of like wrestling is very much like trying not reinvent the wheel. So I don't know if we're getting anywhere with these new rules for a TLC match, but I
Maybe
appreciate
not.
the suggestion. I really
do.
do.
And what else did your brother say?
Oh, he said also this Sam fella, which was quite funny. This Sam fella saying that tables matches are better than ladder matches. That is a rotten shout. He doesn't agree with you, Sam.
He doesn't agree with me there. There's only one way to settle this. With a tables match. Going back to our conversation about matches or certain stipulations that later go on to get their own pay-per-views.
Mm-hmm.
I thought perhaps they haven't done this yet. Every year there's a pay-per-view, not TLC, not Money in the Bank, but every year, custody of Dominic ladder match. So every year Dominic gets a different parent. What do you reckon about that? Good idea?
I think Dominic's super hot right now. So
he is, yeah.
You know, you can imagine how can we spice up this women's title match? Okay, it's Rhea Ripley versus Becky Lynch in custody of Dominic Mysterio. I think it would sell some pay-per-views.
There we go.
Okay, this is interesting. We've got another movie-related comment from Foxwit, Double T. Did you notice the actor Kevin James in the front row? Near the end of the match, when Rico gets a table, he's there.
No, I didn't.
I didn't notice.
Good eyes.
Do you know who else was in the crowd that night?
Who?
I need to find
Al Wilson.
He was in the crowd. But also in the crowd was Zack Ryder, said he was in the crowd for this show.
Oh, was he really?
And he said you can see him at some point during the show. So, yeah, star-studded lineup Survivor Series 2002.
Yeah, very star-studded.
I have a feeling that this show will not be as star-studded.
No, definitely. Well, Hollywood star-studded.
Maybe. I've got one last bit of feedback or one last comment. This was what I thought was a nice message. This is from X Purple Arrows. I wore out this DVD. This is the era I got into wrestling, and all this pay-per-view was on sale at Eckerd. It's an old pharmacy store where I bought the majority of my WWE DVDs at the time. I believe this is where I first learned about Jeff Hardy, Rob Van Dam, Victoria, and a few others. I loved this show, and it made me a fan of so many wrestlers I love and my influences today. So I thought that was quite nice. It was kind of funny to me because I started watching wrestling really young. So when I hear people, when they say, I started watching in 2002 or 2005, like Flip Gordon, for example, I don't think started watching till 2004. For me, it's always really hard to understand. I'm like, how did you not watch it before? But I need to realize people were,
not like you. Yeah.
Not like me. Exactly. So yeah, we appreciate your feedback, guys. If you want to shout out on the show, make sure that you
leave a banger of a comment. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's get into it. So WCW Thunder. I assume you've never seen WCW Thunder before, Sam.
No, what did we used to get on Channel 5? Was it just called WCW Worldwide or what was it called? Worldwide,
I believe. Yeah. Worldwide.
Yeah. So no, I haven't seen Thunder.
So WCW Thunder started in January 1998. It was the second weekly show for WCW, a 2-hour show, and it was on the TBS Superstation. WCW was doing such good business in 1998, 97, 98 that Ted Turner wanted to create a new show. It was going to be taped on Tuesdays but aired on Thursdays, which kind of went against what Eric Bischoff did because he was known for making pro wrestling go live. And I think Bischoff was really resistant to do a second show just because they already had so much work going on with doing Nitro and running the business of WCW Plus, trying to get all these wrestlers to add another show and another date to their schedule was obviously difficult, because I think people assume it's one day, but realistically, when you're a wrestler and you travel, more than likely you're flying in the day before, you're doing the show the next day you're traveling home, especially if the show's on the East Coast or you're on the West Coast or whatever it might be. So it's an extra 3 days. So Nitro on a Monday and then the next day Thunder, it just adds extra days to people's schedules. So yes, it was essentially second show for WCW, and as popular as WCW was at the time, I feel like the idea of adding a second show is you definitely run that risk of overexposure. Would you agree?
Right.
This was from April 26th. The location or the venue is the War Memorial in, I can never say this, Syracuse. Is that right?
Syracuse.
Syracuse, New York. It says here, I don't believe this. I was searching to try and find the attendance for this show, and the only one I could find said there was 1,269 people there. But I don't think that's correct whatsoever, because it didn't look like a big crowd, but it looked like a lot bigger to me than 1,200. So
I was going to say
a lot bigger than 1,200. So if anyone can get the facts on this, maybe I should email Gary Juster. He might know. And it did a rating of 2.7, which is actually still a pretty good rating. So that's WCW Thunder. That's the concept of it. Also, I think WCW Thunder, the idea, which we kind of see a little bit later, was that it was sort of tying in the same time that Brett was coming from WWF to WCW. So the idea of Thunder would be, this would be the show that Brett's on. So try and sell Thunder somewhat different to Nitro. Because I think this is the issue of doing a second show. They always end up just the same as the other one. So this pretty much, other than being blue, it's pretty much the same as Nitro. So essentially got 2 Nitros a week. I think actually what WWE did years later with the brand split was actually pretty clever. If you're going to have 2 shows a week, personally, I think it's a good idea to have a brand split.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is pre-SmackDown, obviously, right?
Yes. So basically this show, WCW doesn't get a lot of credit for this, but Thunder basically encouraged WWE to do a second show as well, which became obviously SmackDown. So, and it's kind of weird. No one talks about this, but I feel like the colors for Nitro and Thunder were kind of red and blue, which is obviously exactly the same as Raw and Nitro. So WWE stealing from WCW again. I feel like I need to get into the background for this show before because the show, we see the opening package and everything else. There's an opening video package, which I'll explain. But I think first I need to go into the background just to let you know how we got here. Because I watched this opening video package, and obviously these are to kind of get you up to date and let you know what's going on and remind the viewer, and for new watchers, let them know what the hell is going on. But for me personally, I watched this and I was more confused. And
I was going to say, and I was a new watcher, and it left me with more questions. And I remember you said we're going to have to give as much context on this episode as possible. And the moment I turned it on, I just thought, well, good luck with that, buddy, because this is nuts.
I'll get into it now. I've got a whole bunch of notes that I wrote down here to try and get to everyone where we're at here for this show. Okay, 1999, business is down. To put things in perspective, in 1998, they made $45 million profit. But in 1999, there was they lost $15 million. So in September 1999, Eric Bischoff was sent home. Basically, they thought that he wasn't doing a good enough job anymore. WCW hired Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara, who had previously been writing for the WWF. And they kind of sold it as Russo was the one that saved the WWF and invented the Attitude Era. That was kind of the sell. Yeah. Whether that was true or not is kind of debatable. So they were brought in from October as the head writer. After 3 months in WCW, they were fed up with Russo, and they suggested to him that we have a committee of writers and not just Russo, which I think is interesting because that's what's always kind of said about Russo, is that he has so many ideas, which is a good thing. The worst idea is a bad idea. But he was in WWF and he'd give his ideas, but there was filters. There was people to say, no, that's not good. Or there was people to say, okay, we can work with that and make it better. So
like you need an editor
in
writing. That's
exactly. There was Vince McMahon, obviously, Pat Patterson, Michael Hayes, Bruce Pritchard.
Yeah.
Here, he was on his own. Well, he was him and Ed Ferrara writing the show. So they suggested, let's do a committee of writers. Russo turned it down, just essentially stayed home and got paid to stay at home. So then they started the committee. It was led by Kevin Sullivan, who previously booked for WCW years before this, but apparently business got even worse. So in April, they brought back Russo with Eric Bischoff to work together as a unit to save WCW. The only thing is that the two men would need to collaborate. Then on April 10th, 2000, this is where it gets pretty confusing. On the episode of Nitro, Bischoff and Russo came out to talk about how their attempts to change wrestling for the better with new ideas were always sabotaged by aging veterans like Hulk Hogan, who had creative control in his contract. But now they were back in a position of power. Bischoff and Russo announced that all titles in WCW were being vacated, so the entire roster could compete for them on an even playing field. So essentially doing a reboot of the company, scrapping everything. We're going to have new champions. With this reboot of the company, the roster was split into two stables. The New Blood, led on screen by Bischoff and Russo, which was the majority of the younger talent on the roster, and the Millionaires Club, basically the older veteran main eventers, guys like Hogan, Ric Flair, DDP, Sid Vicious, etc. The idea was that the young guys were sick of being held down by the main eventers and the veterans, and for some reason, the New Blood were the heels, the guys who are, want a break and feel like they're being held down, and the Millionaires Club, the rich veteran main eventers,
the old guard,
with the old guard was the baby faces. So that's basically where we're at right now in WCW on the time of this show. Russo is the head booker. Does that all make sense?
Broadly, yes. Yeah.
I feel like the idea of just saying, okay, we're scrapping all storylines, all the champions are now vacated, we're starting again. That's never a good look, huh?
It's never a good look, but what's funny is now the video game industry, the movie industry just do this all the time with franchises.
That's a good point.
I'm actually thinking this is the first time. Well, I was going to say this is the first time I saw it. I didn't watch it back then.
Yeah.
But I feel like with what you said, this is the first time I can think of that happening in some sort of media. Just like this reboot, just this, we're starting again. Just everything just being reset and called the same thing happens all the time now, to the point where it's just frustrating and annoying. But this, I think, was kind of fresh.
Well, the difference is, though, is that wrestling is portrayed as a real sport. So it's like saying if you're if you're the champion football team and that, like, now you're not, it doesn't really make any sense, huh?
There's always this, or maybe there wasn't, but I feel like at least with what we saw in Thunder, this is that kind of blurring of the lines between what's real and what's not. So I feel like, I had a feeling you were going to say that. Yes, but when you're getting rid of the old, if the old relied on that, hey, this is a sport, well, you've replaced it now, so it's okay. It is writing your own rules.
But if you want new champions and everything else, you can just have the current champions lose the belts.
Lose it, yes.
I think just coming out and saying we can just scrap it at any time, it kind of makes it makes you seem like everything you've watched before is completely unimportant and
was in vain. And yes, right. and again, and I think I think that nowadays about everything that happens. So this is movies, video games. I think, oh well, why did I give you the money the first time round?
Right.
So
that makes sense.
Yes. Well, but this was kind of uncharted territory, right?
It was. We get into the opening video package. Literally, the first thing, this kind of sums up the whole show. The first thing we see on the show is a video package. And the very first line is Billy Kidman. And he says, "You tried to run me over with a Hummer." That is the start of the show. It's like, okay, we know what we're getting into here.
We're going to hit the ground running. Right. Let's start as we mean to go on. Yeah.
So this video package, has Billy Kidman. "You tried to run me over with a Hummer." And he goes into a promo about Hogan. He's feuding with Hulk Hogan at this point. Yes, Billy Kidman is feuding with Hulk Hogan. We see Kimberly Page tell DDP she wants a divorce. We see David Arquette challenge Eric Bischoff to a match and says that if he pins him, then DDP will get a title shot at Jeff Jarrett. We see Sting covered in a bloodbath or covered in blood hanging from the ceiling. And then we see David Arquette pin Eric Bischoff when Jeff Jarrett misses the guitar shot and hits Bischoff. Then DDP beats Jeff Jarrett in a cage match for the world title. So that's all in that video package. I'm sure there was much more, but there's just way too much going on. I watched it 5 times and I still couldn't keep up with what's going on with WCW right now.
When I first saw it, I thought the first time around that it was showing things that were going to happen later on in the show for some reason.
Okay.
I wasn't actually sure of the chronology of any of it either. I had to watch it after it. It made more sense going back as to what it was. But at the start, I was just dumbfounded. I had no idea what was going on.
This was why I just remember. So in year 2000, I would have been like 11. And I just remember watching WCW because I couldn't watch it all the time. And any time I did, I was just confused. I was like, what's going on? I don't get this. I don't understand this. Asking friends to explain what's going on. This is one aspect where what people don't talk about when they, talk about WWE winning the war. Kevin Nash brings this up. He said he watched WrestleMania 14 and he knew when he watched that show that the WWF were going to win the war because every single match had a really, really well done video package, which was told the story really, really well and just put everyone kind of up to date and just said it was so well done. Whereas WCW, so WWF were very, very good at that with their video packages and everything else. You could watch it for the first time and you get it, you understand. Whereas WCW, you're just more confused every single time. I mean, that's part of it's the booking, but then these video packages don't do a good job of explaining everything either. So
yeah, and I know I turn everything back round to video games at the first opportunity, but if you play a longer game and you save it somewhere and you don't go back to it for a while, and then you go back to it and you just cannot remember where you left off, that's one thing. And I never really complete games because of that. I jump back in, I'm like, what was going on? There's a Pokemon game, Pokemon Fire Red, where they actually, when you loaded it up, they give you a little recap of the last 5 things that you did. So you can bring that game up you can load that up 2 years after, and it just gives you where you were, what you were doing that led up to that point. It's fantastic. That's what WWE do. Yes. I feel like what WCW are doing was not just not giving that at all, like most games do, but giving you a random last 5 things, possibly in the wrong order. Well, that's worse than nothing.
I don't think they're random. It's just...
No, but the information just wasn't... Yeah, but the information that they did give, I couldn't actually tell was pertinent.
Right. So normally, if Raw or SmackDown had a video package showing stuff that happened last week, it would be maybe just one angle. It would be like the main event scene. This is trying
and it's everything that you need and nothing more. It's just very clear.
This is trying to tell us the 10 angles that are going on right now and expecting us to know what's going on. We then see the Thunder opening credits, and after that, a Cadillac pulls up. Eric Bischoff, Kimberly Page, and Jeff Jarrett drag out David Arquette from the Cadillac, and they drag him into the venue, into the arena. Jarrett cuts a promo. He's holding David Arquette hostage. They've kidnapped him. Jeff Jarrett says he's going to snap his neck like a damn twig. DDP and Canyon then come out on the ramp. Jarrett says DDP has something that belongs to him, referring to the World Heavyweight Championship. Jarrett challenges DDP to a tag team match with the title on the line. Then Shane Douglas, are you keeping up? Shane Douglas and Buff Bagwell come out. And it's kind of like, they're going to beat up DDP. But then Ric Flair and Lex Luger come out and beat them up. Jarrett and Bischoff then escape, but still with David Arquette. They've kidnapped him. So DDP is left in the ring with Kimberly, who is saying she wants a divorce. Kimberly slaps DDP. He then retaliates by grabbing her in a front face headlock, and the crowd goes nuts.
The crowd went nuts at that to see some violence against women. They went ape for it.
He then thinks better about it, puts her down, leaves her be, goes to walk out, and then she low blows him from behind. So a lot going on in this opening segment, and this all happened really quite quickly as well. A lot of moving parts. There was one line in this. It kind of took me back to week 1 of Chillin With The Villain. We had the "You suck, pal." On this one, we had "Screw you, Jarrett." And Jarrett's reply was, "Screw me? No, screw you." I forgot this was the time period where saying "screw you" was a big thing that people did.
Was it? Do you reckon it was the most offensive thing you could say on TV still?
I assume so. I think this might have even still been dubbed out on TV.
Oh,
the
wow.
word "screw."
Okay.
And I wonder if they do that, like, oh, if we dub it out, they think we're saying the F word, maybe. I don't know. This was kind of all over the place. So, like I said, it seems like Jarrett and Bischoff have kidnapped David Arquette because he cost Jarrett the world title match like 3 days before Nitro. I should say that. DDP won in a cage match against Jarrett, I guess, with the help of David Arquette. Maybe we should get into why David Arquette is there. Should we get into that?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So David Arquette had starred in the movie Ready to Rumble, which was basically a movie based around WCW. So David Arquette was a massive wrestling fan, and I guess one day someone, as a joke, suggested that David Arquette should win the world title. And Vince Russo was like, that's amazing. Imagine the press we would get for that. So basically they went to David Arquette, suggested it to him, but Arquette was a massive wrestling fan and he knew how the people would respond. So he said, no, I don't want to do it. They're like, listen, the movie kind of depends on this. We need to do something drastic. We need some press for this movie. The budget for Ready to Rumble was 24 million. The box office only ended up being 12.5 million. So this movie lost a lot of money. Putting that pressure on him, he's kind of like, okay, I'll get involved in wrestling and do all this stuff. So that's where we're at with David Arquette. David Arquette before this, like, it's so weird because was he really that big of a Hollywood star? I know he was in Scream, which is obviously a really big movie, but he wasn't that big of it wasn't like Tom Cruise, was he?
No, he wasn't. He was, I mean, he's part of an acting family, isn't he? But I don't think he himself was a big star. Maybe we're wrong, but yeah, I can only think of Scream, which was big at the time. Let's not mess around. But
he was married to Courtney Cox.
Courtney Cox, yeah.
Because Jarrett calls him Mr. Cox. In this. Did you notice that?
Yeah, a couple of times.
But I remember at the time watching all of this when I was younger, and between watching the movie at the time and episodes of Nitro and Thunder, I was just really confused. It's like, okay, so is he from the movie? And I just couldn't really...
Yeah, is he playing the character? Yeah.
Right.
Is he playing his movie character? Yeah, or is he actually playing himself?
But he's supposed to be just David Arquette, it seems.
Yes, he is, yeah.
He is.
In this, 100%, yeah.
But do you think, what was the idea? I guess we're going to get into him winning the world title later, so I won't get into that too much now. I will say this, him wearing those tight leather pants, he's supposed to be a good guy here, and we're supposed to like him, but doesn't make him too endearing wearing this tight leather pants, I thought. He looks like a heel.
I was going to say, are you saying, and they were black, weren't they?
Yeah, he didn't look cool, did he?
No, so the black leather pants is like a more of a traditional heel style of outfit, right?
And I think deep down that's what he wanted to be, and maybe we'll get there. Another thing here, this is the first of many low blows. I forgot during the Attitude Era how popular low blows were. And they got me thinking, actually. I remember when I first saw the low blow, and it's like, it's not like getting punched in the nuts. The idea that you kind of uppercut and between the legs from behind, is that like a real thing that people do in real life? Because I don't think it is. I feel like it's something that wrestling invented, the low blow from behind. Boom. Have you ever been low blow before? Yeah, I guess
I have.
Like that?
What, like in wrestling?
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually have.
Okay, but when someone did it to you,
this was after. Yeah, this was in the playground because Now, I guess the idea behind it is this is devastating because they've got nowhere to go. It's just crushed against your own groin, right?
Are we breaking down now the physics of the low blow?
Of the low blow, we're there already. But imagine the opposite. If you could somehow, like a karate chop, bring it down and just split the bag open like a can of tomatoes. That would be a lot. I want to see a reverse low blow.
So we're already just trying to fit 10 pounds of crap into a 5-pound bag. So Kimberly Page, she was DDP's real life wife. Okay. And I think she's when people talk about the greatest women in wrestling or the greatest divas, or
Mhm.
actually,
Mhm.
should I say the most attractive
Valet.
valets
Yeah.
of all time. Her name never really gets mentioned, but I think she should be
I think
at the
she should
top
be.
there.
My lord, yeah, she like Survivor Series last week. She's a 9-star out of 5, and you can audit me on the maths there.
I was thinking
My God,
DDP is
yeah,
definitely punching above his weight with Kimberly
lucky
Page
lad.
for sure.
Hell yeah.
So Russo's booking, he was the king of the swerve. He's the king of, he wanted wrestling to be a big soap opera. So of course, Kimberly Page is with DDP. What do you want to do? Okay, let's have her tell him she wants a divorce. Which, when you think about it, this is kind of what the Attitude Era in this time period gave people all these sort of perceptions of wrestling just being so outrageous and silly, and very much like the Howard Stern show or Jerry Springer. If she wanted a divorce, she probably wouldn't do it live in a pro wrestling ring on television, would she? You know, it's like, what are they doing? But this was very much Russo's style of booking. Like, oh, you guys have a divorce and we're going to kidnap this actor, and there's a championship that has changed hands a whole bunch of times. So there's like so much going on. If WWE did this angle, if they were going to do something like a divorce angle, it would just be narrow focused on that. That would be what the whole segment was about. Here, we're trying to tell
That's just an element
stories.
of
It's just one element.
Yeah.
Right.
What do you think about that, though?
It's too much. It's way
You
too
reckon
much.
it is?
Yeah, it doesn't make you feel anything. You're not watching this thinking, oh, I feel bad for DDP because his wife wants a divorce. You're not. You're just like, what's going on? And
from an there's zero emotion. There's no aspect of it other than entertainment. But I'm talking about on a pure entertainment standpoint. You reckon you need all of that stuff, do you?
If you want to draw money, I think, yeah. If you do an angle to try and get people invested so they'll pay to see the outcome, I don't think
you need some emotional payoff on top.
Yeah, of course, like a movie, you need to be invested in the character. I mean, I get the argument, there are some movies that would just be loads of random crap and you can watch it and it's entertaining. But I don't think that's long lasting. There's a reason why these movies that are considered the greatest movies of all time are considered them. It's always down to great storytelling,
story,
Star Wars or whatever it might be. So, but this was Russo, and we talked about this about hot shotting, I think last week or the week before. But Russo's style of booking was very much hot shotting and not kind of thinking about tomorrow.
Yeah, the first episode we talked about that for sure.
Right,
yeah.
And if you're trying to get TV ratings, I want to leave the shows on cliffhangers. And I want people to be emotionally invested and want to find out what's happening next. Whereas I feel like people would watch this show and they might be entertained by it, but they might not really care too much what's going to happen next week. They won't watch it, be like, I've got to watch next week to find out what happens. Because like 20 different things happen in that one show. Anyway, after the show, I was exhausted. I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but I was like, blimey.
It did feel more like, less like a classic movie style of storytelling and more like watching like an episode of Tim and Eric.
Yes. Yeah.
Just craziness. Yeah. Which is entertaining.
Right. Absolutely. We then see Mike Tenay, Tony Schiavone, and Bobby the Brain Heenan at the announcers table. They ask, why did Brett hit Hogan with a chair? I don't know. We don't know.
Last week we talked about JR in his pulling sweater.
Yes.
Bobby this week, ready to go out on the town straight after recording, right?
Was he wearing that red vest?
It was like an orange. I think it was orange. Or maybe it was red. But yeah,
it was red.
Another pulling sweater.
But Bobby the Brain, he's kind of older here. I feel like he can get away with wearing that.
Oh, yeah. It's a granddad sweater. Yeah, for sure.
We see Ernest the Cat Miller backstage for a promo about his upcoming match tonight with Bam Bam Bigelow. Gene Okerlund says that Russo and Bischoff aren't happy with the Cat because Terry Funk is the hardcore champion. So Ernest the Cat Miller, I assumed from this promo, is part of the New Blood. I think everyone on the roster, if you're young, you're New Blood. If you're older, you're Millionaires Club. But this was just a really quick promo. The Cat finishes the promo and does a little dance. Yeah. My only notes on this are crap outfit. Sam, are you familiar with the Cat, Ernest Miller?
No, I'm not. I've heard of the name. You said he's young. I was thinking like never have I seen a wrestler more just like So he's just like somebody's dad. That's what he looks like.
Well, okay, not necessarily young, because it does seem like there are some older members of the New Blood. But it's more of a case of the guys that aren't over, basically.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. He just
not the main eventers, basically.
Right. Yeah. And I also noticed the outfit. In fact, this is I used to, back in my more wild Bumble days, I dated this girl who wore the exact same thing for pajamas to bed. Okay. And I'm not kidding. And she also had, this kind of made me feel uncomfortable because she also had red slippers.
Okay. It wasn't Ernest the Cat Miller that you
I think it was. I think it was. Because I see him and he does his little dance and he's got the red shoes on. I just thought, oh jeez Louise. Like, the only difference is she had sleeves. He's cut his off. But I was just looking at it, I was like, that's, I'm not going to say her name, but that's her exact outfit for bed, was what he goes to the ring in. I'm not kidding.
What he wrestles in.
Yeah. So I was just like, oh jeez.
So Ernest the Cat Miller, I think he was Eric Bischoff's karate coach, or like Eric Bischoff's son's karate coach. And
he looks like it.
Yes. So he's like a karate expert, black belt, whatever else. And Bischoff was like, let's train you up and make you a wrestler. And I don't know if you remember any of this, but this is stuff that we absolutely have to review on the show at some point, because I feel like you're going to love it. So basically, in the mid-90s, as you know, Mortal Kombat had taken over America. Super popular. So to capitalize off that, Eric Bischoff wanted to introduce some Mortal Kombat inspired characters. And I don't know if you've heard of Glacier before.
No.
Okay, so they brought in a Sub-Zero-esque wrestler called Glacier. Trust me, it's it's just as good as it sounds. They brought in Raph. They brought in Mortis, who we see later as Canyon, and they also, as a part of this kind of Mortal Kombat division, I think they called it the Blood Runs Cold, they brought in Ernest the Cat Miller as kind of like the karate fighter type. You know Mortal Kombat better than I do. Which character is Ernest the Cat Miller based on?
No, I don't know.
Okay, you don't.
He can't be anyone. Who is he?
Well, he's a karate fighter, so I think in their head they're like, oh, he's
well, that's
like
Liu Kang, isn't it?
Maybe he's Liu Kang then.
Yeah.
So that was basically the reason why he was brought in. He pretty much just was with WCW. He then later, I want to say, did some commentary for WWE, but he's also was in the film. You've seen the film of The Wrestler before, right?
Mickey Rourke? Yeah.
Correct. He's like the big villain that Mickey Rourke wrestles at the end.
Oh, I don't remember that.
He's doing like the foreign menace gimmick. Yeah. You have to go watch it.
Well, that's another one for the list, isn't it? It's funny how something like that seems relatively, that should stick in my mind.
Right.
And I've seen The Wrestler more recently than I saw the remake of Rollerball. Yeah, I remember when what's his name? Stitch?
Yes.
From the comments mentioned Rollerball. I was like, yeah, it is. But when you mentioned the cat was like the lead villain at the end of the Oscar-winning movie The Wrestler, I was just like, oh, I'll have to take your word for it.
So, another point, Peacock strikes again. This is kind of a double-edged sword. So they dub over so much of the music on this show, and I was really disappointed because WCW, whereas WWE had Jim Johnson and he was really good at creating new entrance music. You know, everyone's got to have custom entrance music, and all the classics were, you know, from Jim Johnson. And is it Jim Johnson? Yes, in the WWF. WCW, on the other hand, what they would do is they would just basically take a song and just like a popular song, didn't buy the rights to it, and just copied it and made like a crap version of it. So many songs in this show were dubbed over. The Cat had like a James Brown rip-off song.
That makes sense.
He's kind of going for that gimmick. He used to go, but it was that his was actually pretty good. It went like, I'm the greatest. It was pretty cool. Oh, I think he was the original Somebody Call My Mama, which they used years later for Brodus Clay, I want to say. But yeah, all the theme songs here, I remember at the time, Sting here was using like a rip-off of Seek and Destroy, which is actually really cool. DDP, who comes out on this show a whole bunch of times, he had a rip-off of Smells Like Teen Spirit. And on the Peacock, the network, they just dub it over with this awful music. But it's funny, I remember at the time being a fan, there was reasons why I didn't really like WCW. Well, maybe I should rephrase that. I didn't like it as much as WWE. One of the reasons, it's all the old wrestlers. I remember Hogan and Piper and Flair when I was a kid, but that was one of the reasons. Another reason was just the entrance music all just kind of sucks. Another reason was just how dark everything is, how everyone's just wearing black. Everything's just, there's no color on the show whatsoever. And
so it was the AEW of the 2000s and 90s.
There's color in AEW. There's color, lots of blood.
Yeah, very good.
So, yeah. Did this promo make you excited to see the Cat match later?
No, of course not.
We see Jeff Jarrett throw Arquette down in a boiler room and Eric Bischoff and Kimberly Page laugh. There's a little running thread through the show. We complimented Raw a few weeks ago on their running thread throughout the show. Clearly, they're doing the same thing here. Think it works as well?
So, no, not as well. I did notice, and I think this is something that you might give it props for, and it's very little. You don't like the invisible cap. This wasn't when we talk about Raw. This was, oh no, it was as well, but also we did mention it in Survivor Series with the F cam. It's like, well, at least it's more plausible, I guess, than just the invisible cameraman.
Yeah.
In these segments, the camera is deliberately doing the kind of shaking as if it's guerrilla candid style, like the cameraman's trying to get in and grab something, like he's heard that something's going on. He's just trying to be there rather than him being invisible. I like that. I thought you would have noticed that and picked up on it. Yeah. I like that kind of reality style camera work. I thought that works.
I like that. But then the problem I had with this was they keep showing sort of Bischoff and Jarrett bullying Arquette backstage in different places, or it might even be in the same place, but then also throughout the show, DDP's looking for Arquette and can't find him. It's like,
yeah, I didn't think of that. Yeah.
Is there not monitors around, or can you ask someone? There's like, they did a 2.7 rating. There's people watching this. Someone can tell you. I don't know. Everyone knows where Arquette is other than DDP, who's looking for him.
Right.
So,
yeah.
The next up, the Cat, Ernest Miller, defeats Bam Bam Bigelow in 1 minute and 8 seconds with a really bad kick. Before the match starts, the Cat cuts Bigelow's entrance with another promo. He asks Bam Bam to forgive him. He tells him that he looks up to him, says that he doesn't want to fight Bam Bam, and he wants someone else, and he wants WCW to send out another chump. Cat says, let me get this right. Cat says, I saw your mama's tits. Was it the word he used, or boobs?
It was, he said breasts, but okay. Yeah.
I saw your mama out back, and your boobs are bigger than hers, or your breasts are bigger than hers.
Breasts are bigger than hers. And that was enough to start Bam Bam brawling. That your mama joke was enough to start Bam Bam brawling, despite his initial convictions. As soon as you mentioned your mama, it's like, okay, that's it. I'm getting in the ring.
It seems like this show, just no one can have just a straight match. It's all going to have shenanigans and promos and everything else. The finish, I don't know if I've got this. Do you remember how the finish happened? He gave that really bad kick to Bam Bam's chest, but I feel like there was like a chair or something involved before it. Didn't Bam Bam go to grab a chair? The referee took the chair. He turned around and ate the kick from Ernest the Cat Miller. It was something like that. Let's not keep
something like that. Let's not dwell on it. We've got a lot to do. Yeah.
There's a lot about this that's pretty depressing. One thing I think is, well, those red loafers that the Cat is wrestling. I don't know why he's wrestling in red loafers. It's pretty bizarre. But seeing Bam Bam Bigelow, a man who a lot of people consider one of the greatest big men of all time, he actually main evented a WrestleMania as well, which I'm sure we'll review at one point. He main evented against Lawrence Taylor. And of course, in the late 80s in the WWF, he was a really sort of main event talent. Yeah. Here, he's not looking in the best shape, and he's wrestling in a big baggy t-shirt.
In a t-shirt, yeah.
Right.
Like a bit of merch.
Yeah, he was. What do you think of this match, Sam? The 1 minute and 8 seconds.
1 minute and 10, 8 of it. I really like Bam Bam. That was kind of hard to watch. I actually haven't seen him. I've only seen him in, I guess, his prime. like in WWE. So it was a little bit.
Do you want to guess the age here?
Well, didn't he die young?
Well, but he looks like late 40s here, right?
No, I'd say he looks about 40.
40? Okay.
I would say, yeah.
He was 30, I want to say 37, 38 here, I think. Okay. I felt like he looked really rough here, personally.
Well, he didn't have that kind of vigor or glow about him that he did in...
No.
Maybe it's the outfit. Maybe it's the outfit, the flames and everything that he used to have, where he's just now he's just schlubbing it.
It seemed like a lot of wrestlers, they were in WWF and big stars, and when they came to WCW, they just lost the passion for it, lost their spark. There's a lot of wrestlers on this show like that. You see them, you're like, a lot of the times their gimmick from the WWF has been taken away from them because they can't do it in WCW. And it seems like a lot of people are just phoning it in and collecting a paycheck. And I feel like Bigelow here is probably one of those guys.
Yeah. There's someone later, a WWF guy, who's not phoning it in. We'll get to that later.
There's one guy I'm a massive fan of that was a massive star in the WWF and in WCW. I'm not actually talking about Bret Hart, but this goes to him as well. But you could
I thought you were.
No, another guy. I'll tell you, it's like Kurt Hennig, Mr. Perfect, just in the WWF, amazing, awesome. And then they bring him to WCW like, we can't do Mr. Perfect, so let's just be yourself. Let's just be Kurt Hennig. It's like, well, that's not really that interesting.
He's coming up super soon.
Okay, well, I'm jumping ahead. So,
do you want to know who mine was? Mine was Ric Flair.
Oh, okay. He's a WCW guy.
No, he was in WWF before this, no?
Yeah, but he was in WWF for a year. He was a Crockett guy through and through.
Oh, okay. Well, that explains it then, because he's giving 100 still. Anyway, let's carry on.
So I'm just trying to see if one thing I did notice, the only positive about this, another thing, we're talking about WWF having better production than WCW at the time. WWF, the entrance music was always good. The entrance videos were always really well made. WCW entrance videos, not very well made. And did you notice Bam Bam's entrance video?
No.
It was just Bam Bam, like on a green screen, just stand there banging his chest like this, like,
just what on a like a 4-second loop.
And like a 4-second loop, and they're just giving it a background, and it's clearly green screen, just banging his chest. It was really hilarious. We also should mention that Miss Hancock came to ringside. There's so much going on that you forget. Miss Hancock, aka Stacy Keibler, she's at ringside, and they assume that she's on a scouting mission. So something else going on. But yeah, speaking on
the production levels, like the audio mixing, I found it very hard to hear what was going on.
Oh, really?
Most of the time, yeah.
Okay.
I'll give you a specific example a little bit later then.
Oh, I've got it in my notes here. You didn't even... I thought I forgot this. I bring it up and I was hoping you were going to be like, yeah, that's what happened. But then you just got me even more confused. Our brains are just fried from the show. Man. I've got it here. I am. Bam Bam Bigelow grabs a chair for no reason. Okay, that's what I've got. Bam Bam, all of a sudden in this match, just grabs a chair for no reason. The ref takes it away from him, and then the cat does the bad kick, boom, for the win, and then dances. There we go. Then after the match, WCW cannot do a TV match without having an afterbirth, without having a post-match fight or beatdown. Every single match. And this one, Bam Bam loses. After the match, cat's dancing. Bam Bam just gives him a clothesline, and that's it, and walks off. For no reason. Clearly they're like, okay, we want to put the cat over. Bam Bam's be like, oh, I should pull up a bit of a fight for this. I was a big star. Okay, well, can we do the thing with the ref at least so it's not clean? Okay, then after the match, can I give him a closer? Okay, just meant nothing.
Bare minimum, yeah.
It's like, well, we're doing that in every other match tonight. Can you not do that tonight? Oh, just screw it. Whatever. No one cares. Just do it. Clearly, I don't know who the producers were at the time, but I'm pretty sure it's a case of they just shrugged their shoulders, just like, whatever, let's just collect a paycheck and move on. And we're going to move on right now. We see Billy Kidman and Tori Wilson turn up in a red BMW. That's pretty much it. Kidman's wearing a Tommy Hilfiger fleece, tucked into jorts, I want to say. And it should also, I think on this show, it suggests that Billy Kidman had just beaten Hogan. Hogan is the man that Kidman is feuding with right now. Did you ever know about this feud or hear about it?
I didn't know about the feud. The only thing that I can comment on this is there's
Can I
only 2
guess?
years. Go on.
Is it about Tori Wilson?
Actually, it isn't. But you don't want to distract me. I can if you want. No, there's only 2 years between when last episode we saw Billy Kidman, and I remember in the last episode, last week's episode, Survivor Series 2002, you said, "Oh, Billy Kidman's definitely like filled out. He's jacked here." The amount that he bulked up in 2 years is incredible.
How on earth would he put on so much weight in such a short time? So much muscle in such a short time? Because I want to know, and whatever it was, I want it.
We want to do it, yeah. Like he was super.
He's like twice the size.
He's twice the size, yeah, in 2 years.
In 2 years. In 2 years, yeah. Damn, maybe he should have done that for this run here where they're trying to push him in the
If he
event.
was the size that he was in 02,
WWE,
back then it's more plausible that he could feud with someone like Hogan.
So I have a theory about this. So all of a sudden in 2000, they decide they're going to feud Billy Kidman with Hogan. And the whole thing with WCW, the reputation for years was you got these big stars main eventing, normally ex-WF guys, and then you've got all the workhorses on the lower cards and the cruiserweights and everything else busting their ass, and they can't break the ceiling. But the perception, I think I discussed this last week, was, those vanilla midgets can't draw. And this feud actually got started from a interview Hogan did somewhere, not a work, like a shoot. Basically, he was saying there's loads of guys in WCW that maybe he said they complain that couldn't draw in a flea market, and he named Billy Kidman as one of them. So they decided to turn this into a real program on TV. Here's the issue. Billy Kidman clearly was very talented, but you can't, when you push someone, it's got to be a gradual push. It can't just be he's a low carder or a mid carder, complete mid card, that all of a sudden he's feuding with one of the greatest, most famous wrestlers of all time. You need to build him. He needs to climb his way up the cards, unless they look like someone like Brock Lesnar or they're massive like the Big Show. You got to build them up. If people were just used to seeing him lose in 3-minute matches to Disco Inferno, and now now you're supposed to see him as someone that can beat Hogan, it just doesn't match up. And I almost feel like this sort of, I don't know whose idea this storyline was, but part of me kind of thinks maybe it was like a Bischoff's or a Hogan's that almost wanted to reinforce their sort of perception of these smaller guys can't draw. So it's like, let's do this, which is just so obviously kind of ridiculous. It's not going to work. He's not going to get over.
It'll prove our point.
And it'll prove our point. Whereas if they did this with someone like, I know he's gone by this point, but someone like a Chris Jericho or maybe even Eddie Guerrero, one of those guys, or even Rey Mysterio, then maybe it could have. I just don't think Billy Kidman was the right guy for it. I think everyone just saw this as out of place and just
inorganic and
completely inorganic.
Billy Kidman was popular though, right? Around that time?
Yeah, I think so. They turned him heel here, and I think he's clearly better off as a babyface, right? I think that the feud might have worked a lot better if it was a heel Hogan and a babyface Kidman. That would have worked a lot better, I think.
I would say, yeah.
Because people like the homegrown WCW talent, and they liked guys like Kidman. So that would have made a lot more sense. Kidman's here with Tori, which is his real life girlfriend. It seems like another person that's punching above
his weight. Good on him.
Good on him.
I mean, geez Louise.
It's a nice BMW.
I've always liked Tori Wilson.
You hang out with her?
Not so much these days, Marty.
What do you like about Tori Wilson? She didn't really have a gimmick or a catchphrase, or I can't remember how her entrance music went. I don't know. I was more of a fan of Stacy Keibler than Tori Wilson, I think.
Well, I was more of a fan of Victoria, and I don't feel like we brought that up enough in the last episode.
You've been texting me every day telling me how much you love Victoria.
Hey, you said you wouldn't bring that up. We talked about this.
Pestering me for her number.
Oh, man. No, that was S.A. Rios.
So, where you might be looking for Victoria's number, DDP was in the back looking for David Arquette. We then see Bischoff and Jarrett bullying and tormenting Arquette backstage. They're kind of doing the, okay, you can go now. Haha, just kidding. Just being really, really nasty. Moving
on.
The
amount of underpants that I saw throughout this of David Arquette. His underpants were on display the entire time. Yeah, well, Bischoff even gave him a wedgie. Do you remember?
Was
right
this
at the start.
the wedgie that Kimberly Page has later when she referees. It's just like a theme throughout the show. People's
maybe
underwear being on display.
it's a theme. Maybe it is a theme, but
Arquette's wearing this really quite nice like satin shirt, and they'd done like the kind of comedy rips in the shirt to like show that he'd been beaten up. We didn't actually see him get beaten up. It's just like they put some like dirt on his face,
bruising,
put some holes in his shirt.
Like he's been beaten up by a tiger. It makes no sense.
So next up is we see Chris Kanyon defeat Sean Stasiak in 2 minutes and 41 seconds with the flatliner. We also see a recap of Sean Stasiak beating Kurt Hennig the week previous, or maybe from Nitro previous, with a really bad variation of the F5. As this match starts, Kurt Hennig comes out to watch. He's holding a bottle of water and do commentary. So during the match, Sean taunts Kurt Hennig. The referee decides all of a sudden just to not look, and Kurt Hennig hits Sean Stasiak with brass knuckles so Kanyon can hit his flatliner for the victory. After the match, Kurt Hennig puts the boots to Sean Stasiak. Then Mike Awesome comes out. Kanyon comes out of nowhere and attacks Mike Awesome. Awesome turns it around and he gives Chris Kanyon a really bad German suplex. Then Awesome bombs or power bombs Kanyon through the announcer's table, bearing in mind there's going to be a tables match later tonight. Hennig then perfect plexes Sean Stasiak, but for some reason, even though it's not a match, he keeps the pin on him.
I've got this. Yeah, it cuts back and Kurt Hennig's going for a pinfall for no reason,
which just made him look dumb as hell. Mike Awesome breaks it up. Then Sean Stasiak and Awesome put the boots to Hennig. Then DDP comes out again to make the save. He gives the diamond cutter to Sean Stasiak. Mike Awesome just leaves. DDP cuts a promo and accepts the tag team match for tonight for the title. So, whoa. There's a lot going on here. There's a whole lot going on. First of all, have you seen Sean Stasiak before? Do you know who that is?
I've heard of the name, and then when he came down and they said who it was, I was able to put the name to the face, but I'm not actually familiar.
So Sean Stasiak was the son of Stan Stasiak, who I believe was like the WWF champion for a very short period back in the day. So he's a second generation.
They said he was second generation. I didn't recognize the name of
he was in the WWF for a tiny bit in 99 and his name was Meat. And it's funny that that's
the Mortal Kombat character, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Just incidentally.
And it's funny that we've been talking about underwear because his ring gear, he had trunks that were designed to look like briefs, like underwear. Very kind of weird. They said Meat on them. And he had a short run in the WWF where he teamed up with the Pretty Mean Sisters. I want to say it was Jacqueline and Terry Runnels. He ended up getting fired, and there was a bit of controversy over his firing. I guess the guys in the back had caught him secretly recording them, like audio recording them. He had like a little recorder and he would leave it backstage and record, or he would in the car, he'd sit in the back seat and would record conversations. I think he later said that it was either that it was like he found things funny and he was going to play them back to the guys later and be like, ha ha ha. Or he found all these conversations really interesting and he was trying to learn the business. So he wanted to listen back to them. But obviously the wrestlers being recorded, I mean, you can imagine what wrestlers were like in the year 1999 without their awareness that he's saying. They obviously didn't take too kindly to it and he inevitably got fired. So you think being a second generation wrestler would help you a lot, but clearly not here. But either way, WCW took him. Okay, you're not going to be Meat anymore. You're going to be Sean Stasiak. And for whatever reason, they're trying to give him Mr. Perfect's gimmick. He's even coming out to Mr. Perfect's entrance music, and they've called him the Perfect One, Sean Stasiak. So there's a little background on Sean Stasiak. Chris Kanyon, are you more familiar with him?
Yeah, I know Chris Kanyon. Yeah. I've only known him through WCW. But I recognize Kanyon for sure. He
did come into WWF later during the Invasion angle. He was there. He was like a really good friend of DDP's. They were part of the Jersey Triad, which was also a Bam Bam Bigelow. He originally came into WCW as Mortis, part of that Mortal Kombat division I was talking about. And Chris Kanyon, I think, was kind of famous for inventing a bunch of new moves. I think his gimmick was almost like the innovator of offense. He would come up with all these different moves. That being said, he did do a lot of cool moves. Not a big fan of the flatliner.
No, so that's a unique one that he made up. That's another one of his.
I don't know if he made it up. Maybe he did, but you know the one I'm talking about. You grab a guy and you kind of just pull him down next to you. It almost feels like you're taking a bigger bump than you're giving the guy.
Yeah, almost like a Russian leg sweep, but the other way round kind of thing.
No, but Russian leg sweep, the guy lands in the back. You're like...
No, I'm saying, but the other way round. Like, turn him around, it's...
I guess so, but you're both kind of doing... Yeah.
It doesn't... Yeah, no, I wasn't... It does look like he took worse... Yeah.
It's the same bump. If I give someone a rock bottom, it's basically
rock
the
bottom.
same thing.
It's the same.
Be like, no, this guy hurts this time, and this one doesn't.
Yeah, I was going to say, it looks more like he's getting a rock bottom. Yeah.
We mentioned before about Kurt Hennig. So I always just thought it was a shame that stuff couldn't work out with Kurt Hennig and the WWF. You know, a lot of people, I actually asked on the Instagram, I think it was last week, about the greatest wrestlers to never be WWF champion, and Kurt Hennig's name comes up a lot, especially as he was AWA champion, but we're talking obviously WWF. He did make a comeback to the WWE in 2002 or 3, but unfortunately it looked like it was going to start well, but at the time Hennig was having a lot of problems, I want to say, with substance abuse. Hopefully I'm not wrong, but I'm pretty sure he did, and inevitably died not too long later.
Yeah, how old was he in 03?
He was born in 1958. You do the math.
So
he died in February 2003. So he was in WWF in 2002. They brought him back for that Royal Rumble. I'm going to say the 2002 Royal Rumble, and he had a really good performance. It was like, oh, this could be like a really good run. So they hired him again off the back of his good performance in the Royal Rumble, but then had this substance abuse, was quickly kind of put down the card, and was just doing stuff like Heat. And I think WWE must have known what was up with the substance abuse, because they let him go, and then not long later he passed away. So it's a real shame, man. It's really a shame of the substance abuse in wrestling here. So many wrestlers. Obviously earlier we saw Bam Bam Bigelow, another guy that died young. A lot of these guys ended up that way, and it's just such a shame. It's kind of heartbreaking for me. These are the guys that I
grew up with and idolized,
and then years later I get in the business, and I just would have loved, like, I've met the cat before. I've met Ernest Mena. He lives in Atlanta. He came to a show before, but I would have loved to have met Bam Bam Bigelow, and I would have loved to have met Mr. Perfect, man. And the chance to, I mean, I don't know if I would have ever got the chance to wrestle with Mr. Perfect, but even just the chance to work with him or anything else would have been incredible. So it is a shame. But yeah, this attempt to get Shawn Stasiak over never really worked, never became a big star. This is also when I noticed how many wrestlers, we've got Mike Awesome out there and Shawn Stasiak. It seems like everyone in WCW just wears black trunks. Just black trunks, black knee pads, black boots. Just, they weren't great. It's funny how Russo was so good at coming up with storylines, or come up with these storylines, but he didn't really come up with any gimmicks for wrestlers, it seems.
What I didn't understand, so they gave Shawn Stasiak that perfect, or not Mr. Perfect, but what's it? The perfect one? But what did they call him?
The perfect one, that's what they called him.
Oh, it was, okay. And that was deliberate to start this thing with Kurt Hennig, right? It has to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what happened with it after this episode?
I think they wrestled at Slamboree. I don't know. I can't even remember now.
And then they changed his name from the perfect one after that. It's just a weird...
No,
I'm going to deliberately give you a gimmick for the sake of arguing with somebody else.
Well, yeah. I mean, this was also... I think it was before this. They also had Booker T having a feud with his brother Stevie Ray and Big T over the letter T. So... it's not below them to do a feud over a letter.
Yeah, my takeaway from this, and this was before we started recording, I said to you, there's a part of this show where either I misunderstood everything completely, or it was just the most chaotic thing I've seen. And that was when it cut back and Kurt Hennig's going for a pinfall.
Right. Yeah.
And got broken up. Oh, quick, break up the pinfall.
I don't know if he was like, if the idea was, and the cameras and the production and the commentary didn't really get this, whether the idea was that he gives him the perfect plex. Obviously, this is just not in a match. This is a post-match fight.
Yeah.
He gives him the perfect plex and he holds him down for free to kind of show, like, look, when we wrestle, I can hold you down for free. When like guys will have a fight in the ring, but it's not a match, and they'll put him in a submission and the guy taps out, but obviously it's not a match. It's like, oh, well, if he does that at Sunday, then he's going to win the match, whatever. Maybe it was supposed to be that, but the cameras didn't catch it. They just kind of, I think they even missed a perfect plex, and they just cut back, and it's just
and he's
him
pinning.
holding him.
Yeah, no, we didn't see it. We just saw, yeah.
Really bizarre. Just not in a match, just in a fight. Just, I'm gonna hold you down viciously and hold your leg here and pin you into submission. Very odd.
Yeah, really odd. Speaking of cameras missing something kind of crucial, which makes the aftermath of it read differently. We see Mr. Perfect coming down to the ring, but we don't see him join the commentary table.
No.
That's off screen. And then someone else has just started talking. I'm not familiar with his voice. Maybe you are. So for this first 30 seconds of him on commentary, I didn't know who that was. No, I didn't.
Yeah. He walks out.
It doesn't read well at all when they do things like this.
He walks out, and you assume that he's just watching the match.
I thought he was just going to be watching. And then I thought, who's talking?
Yeah.
And it turns out it was him, and we didn't. Yeah.
He also comes to the ring, and he's just like holding a bottle of water, and I feel like I'm really putting the WWF over today, but I feel like he would have never tried that at WWF. That is something that Vince McMahon wouldn't stand for. It clearly just seems like people here are just not taking liberties, but just like whatever. He's clearly just kind of backstage with his water, just like, yeah, I'll just kind of stumble to the ring how I am, rather than being backstage and getting pumped up, ready to go. And like, right, do I know what I'm doing? Blah, blah, where do I need to be? You know, talking with production, talking with the cameramen, making sure this segment goes amazing. I don't think there was any of that. It's just kind of like, here's my bottle of water. Like, oh, walk to the ring. What am I doing? Commentary? Okay. You know, like these guys just didn't care, and they weren't going to be punished for it, so they just did not care.
Right.
Next up, we see Billy Kidman once again and Tori now on their way to the ring. Funny though, they're both in completely different outfits as they were 10 minutes ago, and Kidman's in full wrestling attire, which I can speak from experience normally takes quite a while to get on. He's also wearing a Hulkamania t-shirt. Don't know why he's wearing that. Kidman makes his entrance with Tori. We see highlights from Nitro. We see Billy Kidman splashing Hogan for a table. A lot of tables on this show. We then see Johnny B. Bad at ringside. I actually think they referred to him as Mark Mero.
Yes, they did.
What struck me with this, I could never get over Johnny B. Bad in WCW. I remember seeing that, and then years later seeing Mark Mero as the kind of the TKO boxer type.
Marvelous.
And I felt like marvelous Mark Mero. And I felt like he looked so different from Johnny B. Bad. Like he managed to change his whole look and presentation so much where you almost look like two different people. Then here, boom, he's just made himself look just like Johnny B. Bad again. And I completely forgot that he popped back here in 2000 in WCW. I'm pretty positive he popped back for like a week or two, and that was it. Because I don't have any memory whatsoever of Mark Mero being in WCW in the year 2000.
No, and they definitely called him Mark Mero. If you just looked at him as Mark Mero, when the camera cut to him, you'd have no idea it was the year 2000 just by looking at him. Like he looks like John Oates from Hall of Oates or something.
He originally was he started in WCW. That's how he first started in wrestling, and he was in WCW as Johnny B. Bad, which was like a Little Richard inspired character.
Yeah,
like very flamboyant.
So the hair and everything makes sense.
Yeah.
And then in the year 2000, he's still looking like that, but they call him Mark Mero. If you didn't know he was...
Clearly he wanted to look like what he did when he was in WCW previously, Johnny B. Bad. So yeah, it's really weird how they didn't call him Johnny B. Bad. It's clearly...
No, they definitely called him Mark Mero.
Well, I understand why they called him Mark Mero actually, because he'd obviously come off WWF TV and maybe they figured people wouldn't know who Johnny B. Bad was, but they knew who Mark Mero was. So maybe the whole point was we introduce him as Mark Mero so people know who he is, and then he can kind of go back into Johnny B. Bad, and maybe they just didn't get there. Also, it's very plausible that WCW at the time, just because they brought in Diesel and Razor Ramon and called them their real names, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, and it worked so well, it almost seemed like they couldn't have, like every wrestler had to have their real name. It seemed.
And he was with a local I can't remember.
So he's boxer trainer. I could not get the guy's name. Could you?
No.
So he's with his trainer sitting there watching the show. I wonder if it'll come into play later in the show. Anyway, Kidman cuts a promo. He says that the legend is dead, referring to Hogan. He says no one could have taken Hogan out of this business for years until Billy Kidman came along. He says that Hogan is in the hospital and he issues an open challenge to anyone in the back. Tori says she can't wait to see Kidman sweat and she can't wait to give the kiss of death. Then Hogan's music plays. He's a real... what is it? He's American made. But unfortunately, it's not the Hogan that we all want. It's Horace Hogan, the nephew of Hulk Hogan, the real-life nephew of Hulk Hogan. And this leads into the match where Billy Kidman with Tori Wilson defeats Horace Hogan in the longest match of the show, I believe, in 5 minutes and 34 seconds after a jumping bulldog for a table on the outside. By the way, I will say there is a tables match tonight, believe it or not, despite the 2 tables spots we've already seen. So,
it's actually next, I think.
I think it's next. It is next.
It's the one after, isn't it?
The match before the finish is a table.
They then go straight into a table match. It's like I made this card. Just obsessed with tables.
It's like one of those things where it's like, okay, so we've got this tables match. We've got the match before. What's the finish for that? Oh, go for a table. No. Like the next match is a tables match. Like that's literally the rules of their match. Do you not see a problem with that? 100%. This is the first time you've seen Horace Hogan, right?
I didn't even catch his name, so I called him Gavin Armlock. So we have this. It's probably going to come up on Instagram eventually. Our own little fantasy made-up federation of just really generic wrestlers.
When you say we, you're not talking to me now. You're talking to the listeners, by the way.
Yeah, but our wrestlers who will come up later, maybe on Instagram, we have these ones, and just Gavin Armlock is just like the most generic wrestler name. Create a wrestler before you actually, the default guy. So he's Gavin Armlock to me. But then after the match, I realized he's Hulk Hogan's, what's it, cousin, did you say?
Nephew. Okay. He looks like, he kind of looks like a create a wrestler or like...
That's what I said, yeah.
Or like a Dollar Tree wrestling figure.
Yes.
He looks like a Dollar Tree wrestling figure that's like a ripoff of Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Yes.
And even his name, like that's what it would be. You'd be in Dollar Tree, you'd see the figure, it would look like
his
Stone
facial
Cold.
hair looks stuck on like a disguise. Yeah.
And the name would say Horace Hogan. That sounds like a ripoff of Hulk
like
Hogan.
A legally distinct Hulk Hogan. It's and the creator wrestler, it's exactly what he looks like.
Horace Hogan, he was the legit nephew of Hulk. I want to say he was Hogan's brother's son, and Hogan's brother had passed away like years ago, I want to say. So I don't know how much Hogan had to do with Horace. I've also heard that I think Mike Awesome is the cousin of Horace Hogan. So, and he's on this show as well. So it's all over the place. But what a way to just kind of disappoint the crowd where they play Hogan's music and Horace Hogan comes out. It's clearly also, this is the era. We've got a match here and both wrestlers are wearing jorts to wrestle in and little military boots with the white socks or whatever else. But did you have any thoughts about this, Samuel?
My notes may be not in the right order, but actually reading back through them, this card was so insane that I don't know how they may well be.
Mm.
And I wrote them. But was this the match where Bischoff intervenes and but he's not a sanctioned match official, but he just closes out the match instead of a referee? And it counted? That was this one, right? Unless it wasn't. This is the nature of this whole episode.
To get people,
it was carnage.
Just to get people in context, what's going on here? So it's Billy Kidman versus Horace Hogan. Eric Bischoff comes out during the match. At one point, Horace Hogan just gets out and he gets a chair. He hits Kidman with it. There's no disqualification. I'm not saying that this is a no disqualification match. So just don't disqualify him for hitting him with the chair. And the commentary have to kind of cover up and go, oh, the referee is letting it go. Horace Hogan then gets a table. We then see like the third or fourth low blow in the show. Tori low blows Horace Hogan. And she also does it where it looks like she kind of like grabs
Grabs
his
it.
junk.
Yeah, grabs his balls.
She like grabs his junk, which is really kind of weird. Eric Bischoff then comes out. He kicks the referee down. Again, should be a disqualification. Then he taps Horace Hogan in the head with a chair. Really bad chair shot. And then Billy Kidman grabs Horace and he does this like running bulldog off the turnbuckles to the outside through a table.
Yeah.
And then Eric Bischoff, who just came out to run in, does the 3 count.
And he's not a special guest like referee.
He's the Vince McMahon of the company, though. Essentially, he's
yes.
Him and in storyline, him and Russo are running the company. So I guess you're supposed to assume that they have the authority to do this. I guess.
And intervene and referee. Like this was his causing.
Why would you want to work for this company for a wrestler? You know,
I know.
These are the 2 bosses.
Yeah.
Just like
this is my working conditions.
Yeah, like workers' rights. Like the boss comes out and hits me in the head with a chair, and this is just.
And then declares that he's able to be a sanctioned match official and count that as allowed.
We haven't discussed this yet.
HR nightmare.
What do you think of Bischoff's just fully going with the grey hair?
It looks almost white.
Yeah.
It's longer as well. So
yeah,
it looks like it's a stylistic choice, which it was.
It doesn't look good, in my opinion.
It looks
he looks
a
better
bit
now
anime.
than he does back then.
He's bald now, isn't he?
Well, he just shaved his head because he lost a bet, I want to say, but I think he shaved his head numerous times in wrestling, like for storylines and stuff. But he definitely dyes his hair. And he looks like better. Like here, it sticks out like a sore thumb, and it does not look good.
No, it doesn't. It looks
because
like,
I think he's quite I'm going to sound like he's quite a good-looking guy, but the grey hair just kills it for him.
Yeah.
What did you think here of Billy Kidman's heel work? I assume it's the first time you've seen Billy Kidman as a heel.
Pretty sure it is. Yeah. It's okay.
Yeah.
I don't really have anything to say about it. Mm-hmm. I don't understand what the heel work was apart from getting involved in weapons where they're not supposed to be. Is that the extent of it?
Well,
he's got Tori in there to intervene and do logos and stuff like that. But that's, it wasn't really, nothing really stood out as unique.
And the thing is, it's Billy Kidman as a heel, because he's like so much smaller, kind of needs to be like a chicken shit heel that kind of takes a lot of bumps and everything else and has to use underhand tactics to get the advantage and everything else. But this is obviously a match to obviously get Kidman more over, because they're getting him ready to wrestle Hogan. But then he's wrestling Horace Hogan. So it's kind of like, well, Kidman can't really gobble him up because this Horace guy is 3 times the size of Kidman. So it's kind of difficult.
Was this Horace Hogan fellow in episodes before? Was he established, or was this the first time he came out?
Yes, yeah. He was part of like the NWO and everything else.
Oh, okay.
So he was always like a background player though. He never really did anything significant. I think when WCW got purchased from the WWF, he was brought on to WWF and it was in their developmental territory for like a short while. So it never made it to TV and then got released. And yeah, I don't think he did too much else in the industry. I think he wrestled in England quite a bit actually. But you'd think being Hogan's nephew would be like a ticket to being a huge superstar in wrestling.
Oh, like an autos, like sign him up just by,
It doesn't really work like that. And I think with WCW, people kind of just took the piss. They kind of like, oh, I've got my son. Can I get him a job? It's like, is he a wrestler? It's like, no. It's like, oh, he'll learn. Like we had David Flair there. I don't know.
David Flair I was going to bring up.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I have. Yeah.
And it kind of feels like this with Horace Hogan. I think, just like, well, he's a big guy. He was a big guy, but yeah, he didn't. If you're that big, and he was pretty athletic, and he was in pretty good shape, and he's Hogan's nephew, and he didn't become a big star, there's something seriously wrong there.
There is. So I just remembered this. I didn't know who he was, but his look, his massive goatee, his bald head, his size, and his outfit, he looked like I was driving in Florida a few years ago, and there was a fender bender or whatever, just a little ding or whatever, and there were 2 cars at the side of the road, and these 2 guys were just having a go at each other, were just shouting at each other. Both of them, this is so Florida, looked and dressed just like this Horace Hogan.
I can
Both of them
believe
look
it.
like the same guy. And they both had ankle tags, whatever they're called. You know, like when you're on house
home
arrest.
Yeah.
Yes. They would, and that's just, I was just like, that's what he looks like. And I promise you, they both look like Horace Hogan and they both had ankle tags. I was just like, Florida. And then
I mean,
carried on with my day, but that's what he looks like.
Hogan's from Florida, so it could have well been them.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's just funny how he just looks like a guy who would have an ankle tag on in Florida.
Does.
Yeah.
He does.
Oh, dearie me.
Tank Abbott comes to the ring for a promo. He says he's been in more fights than everyone else in the building combined. He calls out Goldberg, but suggests that Goldberg is ghosting him. He then walks around the ring looking for someone to have a fight with. Johnny B. Bad / Mark Merrow steps up. They get in the ring and they have a boxing style fight. Security come in, they break it up, and the commentary says that Merrow doesn't even work here. Then they play his music. I should also mention Merrow's trainer. I didn't catch his name. I watched it a few times, didn't catch his name. He was involved in this. But yeah, a little segment here. They're pushing Tank Abbott's feud with Goldberg, which in the end never happened. And they have Mark Merrow involved here. And I'm pretty sure Mark Merrow left not long after this. So interesting segment. I assume you're aware of Tank Abbott.
Yeah, for sure. He's another one of those legit boys, right? We talked about Ken Shamrock, right? On episode 1. Not as much as we talked about Steve Blackman. Tank Abbott's another ex-fighter, right?
He was in the UFC. I don't think Tank Abbott was quite as successful as Ken Shamrock. I'm trying to look up his win-loss record. Okay, can you guess his win-loss record in mixed martial arts?
I reckon he's won 4. He's lost 1, and if they have draws, he's drawn once. I don't reckon he has too much of a record.
So you think he's won more than he's lost?
Yes.
Okay, so he's won...
But not by much.
Okay, so he's won 10 matches, but he's lost 15.
Okay.
So not the greatest record. Obviously, well, I was about to say better than mine, but no, I'm 1-0. I won my jiu-jitsu fight. So
yes, that is true.
I have a better fighting record than Tank Abbott.
Tank Abbott.
So they brought Tank Abbott in here to basically the idea was to bring him in from the UFC or the background of the UFC. I assume they trained him up to wrestle somewhat. I don't think a lot. And the idea was they could have him wrestle Goldberg as a kind of like a real tough guy versus Goldberg, like the ultimate WCW wrestler. Unfortunately, they never get to this match because I want to say not long after this, they do a segment where Goldberg chases someone to the back. They get in a limousine and Goldberg is supposed to smash, I don't know if you've ever seen this before, smash the windows with like a bat or something. But for whatever reason, he didn't have the bat. I don't know if he dropped it or the bat wasn't there. So instead he decides to punch the windows in, but these like legit windows, obviously. Started smashes and like hammer fisting a bunch of these windows on the limousine. Smashes one like this, it breaks and it cuts all his forearm up, like deep cuts. Ooh. And I think he was out for like 6 or 7 months because of this, because of his stupidity. The WCW's top star. What was he thinking?
That's disgusting. That's scary as well.
It is, really. He could have died.
100%, yeah, he could have died.
Like just Goldberg's done a lot of stuff like this over the years. Wasn't his match for Undertaker that was really bad? He came out to the ring and he'd already got blood because he'd like, I might be getting this wrong, but he
headbutted a door or something
to get to fire himself up.
Yeah.
So.
I've got to say though, the dedication to this setup that we have isn't working because there's a prop that's not working or whatever, it's not there. Yeah. Like his dedication to finishing that through. Okay, I'm just going to punch through it with my bare hands, even if it kills me. Like his dedication there, we have to admire.
I guess you do.
But that's scary.
It is. What do you think of the idea of, okay, this is pro wrestling, but now we're bringing in a real fighter. You better be right. This guy's a real fighter. What do you think of that?
So, unless I'm mistaken, obviously Ken Shamrock came in the WWF, but they didn't. He still adhered to the rules of pro wrestling, right? He kind of transitioned.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas Tank Abbott, it seems to me, it's just like, no, I'm the fisticuffs guy.
Yeah.
Right? Am I wrong? Like, it's not like he transitioned into pro wrestling. He's just the fighter in the wrestling organization. And I don't like that as much. But at that time, it was kind of, I like a brawler,
Yeah.
but there needs to be a level of, I can't think of the term, but he needs to have at least the fundamentals of wrestling for it to be enjoyable. First of all, I like Tank Abbott. I think he's kind of cool.
You like Tank Abbott?
I like Tank Abbott. I don't like that he looks like a schlub. So
He does.
For example, Brock Lesnar, I'd say, is like a legit hard man, or Ken Shamrock and stuff. But they've got they have an outfit made for them. Tank Abbott looks like he's just wearing what he would do his lawn in on a Sunday, or on laundry day.
Well, I feel like he's wearing fight shorts is what he's wearing.
But they have what's the term? Just that kind of fabric, that jogging bottoms fabric. And it just looks schlubby as hell with a drawstring. And so he doesn't look like a TV star. He's not acting like a TV star, because that's what I think pro wrestling is. So he's just a little too much that other way. He needs he may be legitimate. The record that you read out for him, whatever, he's still legit. He's still legitimate.
He is.
But he needs to be somewhere in the middle, and he's not. He's too far the other end for me.
It's another bald guy with a goatee, which seems to be a running theme at this time.
Horace Hogan,
Obviously,
yeah.
Stone Cold got over and Goldberg got over. So it's like, right, we need guys that are bald with goatees. Funny little trivia. So, I gave us the background at the start of the show, and I said Russo, it wasn't working with Russo, and they decided they didn't get rid of him, but they said we want to have a committee of writers, and Russo left and went home.
Yeah.
I guess the drawing point with that is Russo's booking was so wacky, and he was pushing to bring Tank Abbott in, or maybe he was already there, and they wanted to put the world title. He wanted to put the world title on Tank Abbott. And the company was like, okay, he's gone too far now.
He's nuts. He's cracked.
Right. So they couldn't do it to him. So instead they're like, okay, let's put it on David Arquette, which is, much better than Tank Abbott. So that's kind of funny that Russo says he got fired for suggesting Tank Abbott as the world champ. They tried to do this thing with Goldberg. It doesn't happen. Not long after this, they pretty much turn Tank Abbott into a comedy wrestler. Remember when I said about how the WWF, they've given up on big guys when they make them dance.
Yeah.
Not long after this, they had Tank Abbott join Free Count, which was a boy band gimmick with actually Shane Helms in it. We talked about Shane Hurricane Helms last week. His original gimmick in WCW was Free Count. It was a kind of take on the popularity of boy bands at the time. Yeah, NSYNC and your Backstreet Boys. It was him, Evan Courageous, and Shannon Moore. And they had Tank Abbott join for, I assume, a few weeks, and the idea was that he liked the music and he would dance to it and everything else. So they brought him in because he's a badass fighter, and then have him end up doing that. And it's like, okay, if he's not going to be the badass fighter and he's doing that, you could have brought anyone in. So, and Mark Miro was like a Golden Gloves champion or something. He's got a background in boxing, so I guess that was their idea here. They're like, okay, let's have them two have little fisticuffs in the ring. The crowd didn't really seem to care.
No, there wasn't just those two and the boxing trainer, I can't remember his name, in the ring. There were a lot of other actors in there as well. It was just carnage. There was a lot going on. It was, because I should say, I think there were event security trying to break it up or something like that. There was a million people in the ring. I couldn't really see what was going on. They were obviously pulling punches, and it was just a little bit too messy. No one really was interested, like you said. I've got a funny story about, well, it's not about Tank Abbott, but the one thing I remember about Tank Abbott is, at the time, Marty, I was in school and we were in the gym because it was PE or sports, and we were sat there on the gym floor, just having, if you remember back in PE when you're in the gym, it used to take an inordinate amount of time for the gym teacher to get everything ready. So, and before you're in groups and everything, you just sat around on the gym floor talking. Yeah. And I was having this conversation with this friend of mine, another wrestling fan. We were kids. And I said, "Oh, what do you reckon is the most devastating wrestling finisher ever?" "I reckon it's the pedigree." And my friend Paul said, "It's actually Tank Abbott's, because his finisher is a real punch that will insta-kill you, and he's not allowed to use it." And I always think about that, about Tank Abbott. And we never, yeah, it's his finishing move was a real punch that would instantly kill you. And he's banned from using it. That's what my friend Paul said. And we never got to finish that argument, because we then heard all this commotion behind us. We turn around, and this boy called Daniel I shouldn't say his full name. Daniel was just sat there with a smile on his face in a pool of his own wee.
And this is what you think of when you see Tank Abbott. No wonder why his wrestling career never took off. Did you also, Tank Abbott was in Friends once as well, I want to say?
Was he?
I believe so, in an episode of, was it Friends? Or is it Entourage? No, it's Friends. He was in Friends. We see Sting backstage, still covered in blood from the bloodbath that he received 3 days ago on Nitro. Apparently he hasn't washed or changed his clothes or anything. And the commentators shout, "He's still covered in red." I'm assuming they couldn't say blood for some reason on
Oh,
TV.
maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Well, why else would they say he's clearly supposed to be covered in blood from the bloodbath, but they say he's covered in red. Like, red is a color. Like, it's not something you can be.
Is he covered in red pen?
Right,
you know, like,
exactly. Red what? You know,
red wine. Yeah,
he's covered in red.
Is he really angry and his face is all red? Yeah.
The idea that Sting got this bloodbath and it kind of put him into a trance where he just didn't wash, didn't change his clothes or anything for 3 days and just covered in this blood, and it would still be kind of fully over him. Very bizarre.
And it hadn't is that the word? Coagulated or whatever, or dried out or changed color. It's just like fresh.
You look kind of wet still, right?
Yeah, shiny and wet. Yeah.
So the bloodbaths was a thing that they did in WWF with the Brood and Gangrel, which I assume that Vince Russo was heavily involved in. And clearly he just decided he wanted to do it again in WCW. And at the time, we've got this feud going on between Sting and Vampiro, which I feel like Russo was trying to book as his kind of Undertaker versus Kane-esque feud, because they did a bunch of weird stuff. They did something where Vampiro set Sting on fire on top of the Titantron, I want to say, and threw him off it, and all this kind of weird stuff with stunts and everything else. So, yeah, he's covered in blood and he's walking around. We then see DDP, and he finds David Arquette finally in the boiler room where he's been all along.
Yeah.
DDP finds him. The next match, a tables match. It's not for the tables championship. I think this show is a contender for the tables championship because there's so many
this show
on the show.
Yeah, this show is our pay-per-view called Tables. This would be it. If we made a pay-per-view called Tables, it's this.
It's funny how we kind of put that out last week about a pay-per-view just being called T for Tables.
For Tables,
This is pretty much it, because we have a tables match where Sting defeats the Wall in 1 minute and 20 seconds with a powerbomb through the table. After the match, Vampiro and the Wall jump Sting, but Sting fights back and clears house, because every single match on this show has to have an afterbirth. They can't just have someone win and that's it. It's got to have a post-match attack or a post-match fight. Yeah, Sting, we mentioned it before, he's still covered in the blood. We do actually see highlights, I think, just before the bell rings, of Vampiro giving Sting the bloodbath.
We did, yeah.
So this is 1 minute and 20 seconds. Not a whole lot to talk about other than there's a really funny moment in this match where Sting, so the Wall is stood on the apron. Behind him on the floor is a table. He's bent over and Sting is going to sunset flip from the inside of the ring over the top of the Wall to grab him, to assume to powerbomb him through the table. And as he's doing it, I have seen this before, but it was years ago. As he's doing it, I'm like, whoa, that's really athletic for Sting. That's not an easy move to pull off. And sure enough, he doesn't pull it off at all. Just when he goes over, loses grip and just boom and clunks his head on the back of the ring.
Yeah. And I mentioned how the audio was kind of hard just generally across the production. However, when he landed, that was the most clear sound that I could hear throughout the entire night of the production. It honestly sounded like a cartoon sound effect of somebody falling over, but it was real. Really... It was so embarrassing, so loud.
He fell on his ass. He smashed his head. It was like, oh boy. And then he just gets back up. It's like, oh, back to it.
Carries on with
does the power bomb to the wall. He power bombs the wall through the table. And clearly someone has said, right, we've got to keep the wall strong because he's a big guy. So the wall takes the power bomb through the table on the floor. And he just completely gets up straight away and no-sells it. Like, that was a mistake. Like, he got a lucky fluke on me and just doesn't sell it whatsoever. They also, I want to say this is the first tables match in WCW history. Clearly not the first table bump, but the first tables match. And not only is it over in 1 minute and 20 seconds, but the gimmick, they just completely bury right away. Well, obviously from having a table bump right before it, but someone goes through, well, 2 or maybe more, but the wall takes it and he doesn't even sell it like it hurts or anything else. It's kind of like, what's the point of a tables match? You compare this to the first ever WWF tables match. It's just, I wanted to ask you this. Your favorite pay-per-view of all time is Royal Rumble 2000. So that was what, 3 months before this show? Think back to that Royal Rumble 2000 and the production of that and everything. Or think about WrestleMania 2000 because that would have been the same time as this. And just think of the difference in quality between the two shows. It's pretty insane to think about how you can see why the WWF won the war. That's for sure.
Oh, for sure. And like you said, I know we've hammered this home, but you said that this is a table match, and both previous matches, I think, or the match before the cat had people get tabled. So you had Canyon, right? He gets tabled through an announcer table.
I like how you're saying he gets tabled. Is that
he gets tabled?
You've come up with? He gets tabled.
No, that's a phrase.
That's not a phrase.
100%.
100% not a phrase.
Okay, comments on the IG. If you've heard of the phrase "someone's got tabled" as shorthand for being put through a table, just say so, because I said that my whole life, and all of my friends have, apart from you. You've never heard this before. He got tabled.
So I've been in the industry for nearly 20 years. I've been watching it since I was 5 years old, and I never ever heard the phrase, at least from like a professional, someone got tabled. No way. Would you say someone got chaired?
No.
Would you say someone got tabled?
Yes. Yes.
Well, let's ask the people. Let's ask the chillers. Let's ask the, what do you call them? The podsters?
The little podimals, the podlets. I can't remember what we called them.
The little villains.
The little villains. Just so you had Canyon gets tabled for absolutely no reason through the announcer's table. The previous match ended with the creator wrestler Gavin Armlock getting tabled. So the card, I don't want to be rude, but there's no other better way of saying this. Like, the card shot its load twice already.
Yes.
We've already hammered that home. I didn't actually know that this was supposed to be their premiere or their debut of the tables match, which makes it 10 times worse.
It does. Well, you think WWF's first tables match was January 2000 with the Dudleys, right? They invented it, the tables match. And I remember at the time, I think I spoke about it already. We're going to keep going back to the show, apparently. How excited I was for a tables match, and when I watched it, how my mind was blown. Imagine you're watching this show and they're like, oh, there's going to be a tables match. Like, I can't wait to see the tables match. There's all these table bumps before it, so you don't care about it. You're like, oh, I've seen people go through tables now. I don't need to keep the channel on and watch this tables match because I've already seen it. It's just bizarre, insane booking. I can't believe that this slipped through the cracks, how someone didn't say, hang on, you got a table bump booked here and a table bump booked here before the tables match. There's just zero quality control. And I can almost guarantee that producers or workers realized this, noticed it, and was just kind of like, who cares? We don't care. We just want to get paid and go home. So absolutely ridiculous. Like if I was on a show and I had a tables match and two different people did table spots before me, I would be absolutely furious.
I'll be so
furious. Furious. So
who's the Wall? Why is he called the Wall, Marty? Is it because he's impossible to talk to?
Well, actually, the reason is almost as bad as that. So there was a German wrestler in WCW for years called Alex Wright. I'm not too sure if you're familiar with him, but during this kind of period when they had to rebrand everyone, they changed his gimmick from Alex Wright. He was like a dancing German.
He's not the Berlin Wall, is he?
He was called Berlin.
Oh,
and they brought the Wall in. I'm not sure where the Wall came from, maybe the power plant or something, but they brought the Wall in as his like enforcer, bouncer. And because he was Berlin, they called him the Wall. So the Wall, he didn't really do a whole lot in professional wrestling. He had these like few years in WCW. He was the Wall here. I think later he joined the Misfits in Action and he was called A-Wall. Like he's gone A-Wall.
I don't
know. Then I think after, maybe I was getting confused with Horace Hogan earlier. I think when WWF brought WCW, he came to the WWF, but like in the developmental system, one of the developmental systems, was there for a few months and then got let go. I think he's probably most well known for the first ever NWA TNA world title match was Ken Shamrock versus the Wall, but the Wall would change his gimmick and he was called Malice. And I want to say he'd grown his hair and he'd actually got in pretty good shape and he was wearing trunks and stuff and just looked completely different. But he was in that first title match. But yeah, he's another big guy. His gear here, just black pants, black tank top. Not very impressive for a big guy. And obviously, I mean, he only had a minute and 20 seconds to show what he could do. But this was just, again, all these matches are just vehicles to progress the storylines that they want to tell, which I would normally say is a good thing. But
it worked in our episode 1, that episode of Raw that we watched. Similar concept, right?
Right.
And Vampiro jumps in at the end, and more carnage, right? As a running theme of this show, more post-match carnage. I always liked Vampiro. I watched him, obviously, back in the day when we caught it on Channel 5. Thought it was really, really cool. I always used to pick him in the games if I could. Oh, man, WCW games is... If we think this episode's crazy. If we ever get to the WCW games, Backstage Assault, that's some... Oh, my God.
Oh, that's the one you choose?
Yeah, I always liked Vampiro. He didn't have much to do apart from slap people around and brawl. It was a bit messy this time around. But what's your thoughts on Vampiro? Actually, quickly, I will say, I always kind of remembered him as looking really kind of scary and formidable. Now I'm an adult, not so much, but still like a good look, right?
Oh, I think a really good look. I think
so, yeah.
The look was kind of one of his strong points, I want to say.
Did the heavy lifting sort of thing. I mean, he's a good wrestler, though. But
so here's the thing with Vampiro here in WCW. So Vampiro is Canadian, but he spent pretty much the majority of his career in Mexico. He was a really big star, like the Canadian vampire in Mexico. And so obviously he trained in lucha and everything else. Coming here into WCW, like he's a big guy, and it seemed like they tried to push him here, obviously doing this feud with Sting. I think they were originally for maybe a few weeks or a month a tag team, Sting and Vampiro, like the Brothers in Paint. And of course, it's Russo bookings at Swerve. Vampiro turns on Sting. But I think the word is that Sting didn't really enjoy working with Vampiro. And I'm guessing it's probably because of like clash of styles, because the lucha style compared to like the main event WCW style is so different. You'd really have it coming to WCW. Like Conan always talks about that, about when he came to WCW, he just had to, he'd been wrestling completely in lucha libre, and he had to really adapt to the American style. And it's I mean, I wrestle in Mexico pretty often, and there's a big difference between the American style and the lucha libre style. So just so much of it, and the psychology and the storytelling aspects, it's all just completely different. And obviously what works in Mexico and and what the fans are conditioned to there and what works in America, two completely different things. So I think he had the size and the look and the charisma to kind of put him in this position, but I don't know if it ever worked out too much with the matches, and maybe that's why Russo wanted to book so much kind of smoke and mirrors with it, with all this like setting each other on fire and doing bloodbaths and everything else. So, but I'm a fan of Vampiro. I had a cool Vampiro t-shirt when I was younger that I used to wear pretty proudly. So yeah, and I think the next pay-per-view, Slamboree, which maybe we need to review now, they have their match, so we should go back and watch it.
Yeah, I think we should. Sting, do you prefer the Crow look or the old-fashioned, what's it called, Surfer? Was it called Surfer Sting?
100% Surfer Sting for me.
Me too.
Oh, really? That surprises me.
Why?
I just thought you'd like the Crow Sting.
Yeah, but I love the Ultimate Warrior and his attire, so yeah. No, I think I prefer Surfer Sting for sure.
Well, I thought they were both good, to be fair.
And also super popular, like really worked, right? The Crow Sting. Yeah.
Really did a good job of reinventing himself, because it's not like,
for sure.
You could ask loads of people and they would probably it's not like everyone would say Surfer Sting. I think it might be kind of a split on which one they prefer. I think a lot of people really like the Crow Sting. So I think that's really
I actually
cool.
know more people who like the Crow Sting.
Oh, really?
I'd actually say I'd probably lean towards, but then I'm more of a casual community.
Yeah. Maybe we need to ask the people. I think the diehard wrestling fans might prefer the Surfer Sting. And that's probably just because that when he was Surfer Sting, the company wasn't so crazy. And, he was having good matches with Ric Flair and Lex Luger, Barry Windham, all these guys. And that now he's just doing all this chaotic
insane stuff. Yeah.
Right. So the diehard wrestling fan. Well, for the first year of this Crow gimmicks, Sting, or first, was it 18 months? He didn't wrestle. He just hung in the rafters, so he didn't.
Yeah, it came down.
Wrestle.
Yeah, with a bat, right? If I remember, in his hand.
Yeah, Sting's bat. And he's still going strong today, Sting. Huh? He's still wrestling.
Oh wow, is he? Cool.
Yeah. Did you not see a few weeks ago on AEW, someone set up someone? I think I can't remember who it was. Maybe Sammy Guevara on 2 tables. Sting was going to table him. They put these tables, but they were really far from the ring, and Sting was on top of a ladder or on a ladder that was in the ring, and wanted to jump off the ladder to splash Sammy Guevara through the table, but they were just set up way, way, way too far. And I was watching it going, oh, this is not going to end well. And sure enough, he doesn't quite make it, and his face gets like smashed into Sammy Guevara's knee, and it busts his lip open.
Ooh.
And and it's like,
Not
I think
good.
they said he was 64. Is that right? No.
Oh wow. I mean,
And he's doing that?
yeah.
60.
I mean, he would be, right? If he's because we're looking at something that's nearly 25 years old.
That's a Sting wrestler. He was born in 1959, which would make him
Yeah.
really 64. Yeah, I guess so, huh? Wow, 64.
Wow.
And he's doing that. I feel like I've been wrestling a long time, and I couldn't do that now. And so
64, that's crazy.
that is bizarre. But no, I like Surfer Sting, but I also liked the Crow Sting. So, but
Can we get a poll? So I was just saying, can we get a poll out on that? I'm curious.
We can get a poll. Well, there's also maybe it needs to be four options, because there was also the Wolfpack Sting when he was all red. He had red on him again.
But properly this time.
Properly red.
Just to avoid confusion.
Right. Wolfpack Sting, and then later in TNA, the Joker Sting. I don't know if you ever saw that.
No.
At some point, we're going to do some TNA, so maybe we'll get to cover Joker Sting. But
Okay.
yeah, I'll put it to the poll. After this, we see Buff Bagwell, Vince Russo, and Shane Douglas walking backstage.
Yeah.
Sting then leaves the building, still covered in blood. The commentators are like, he's in a trance. So, okay.
Yeah. The part where Vince Russo is talking, when it cuts to them in the corridor and they're walking like it's the West Wing, that's the part earlier when I said I'm going to bring up a part where I couldn't understand a word anyone was saying because of the sound mixing. It was that part. Couldn't understand any word that came out of Vince Russo's mouth.
I don't think you were supposed to, though.
But you could hear enough to hear that they're talking.
Right, but I think it was supposed to be just like a candid shot of them.
Gotcha.
Like, they get ready to come to the ring,
All right.
That being said, Russo comes to the ring with Buff Bagwell and Shane Douglas. He says Rochester is not New York. He says that the place sucks. Some cheap heat, which I'm sure you enjoyed.
I was in my element.
Buff says he's sick of Lex Luger. Shane Douglas cuts a promo on Ric Flair. Surprise, surprise there. He says this line. This may not sound like a wrestling interview, Flair, because this is a damn shoot.
Mm-hmm.
Says he finally gets what he's been waiting for his entire career. Your ass on a platter delivered to me to get your ass franchised. Little odd, little ass. I guess getting your ass franchised is like getting tabled, I guess.
It doesn't roll off the tongue as much as getting tabled, but it's similar, I guess.
There's a whole lot here, which I
should
just
to unpack.
Get through, just so the listeners who haven't watched this or haven't watched it recently understand, and then we can go through our thoughts on it because there's a lot.
Yeah.
Ric Flair, Lex Luger, and Liz come out.
Mm-hmm.
Flair cuts a promo. He puts over the Millionaires Club. Takes off his jacket, undoes his shirt. He calls Vince Russo a mark and says Russo is a mark for him and a whole bunch of other things. He says there's only one franchise in WCW and his name is Sting. He says he has pissed away more on bar tabs than you all will ever make. The commentators say that's a shoot right there, which it probably is. Like legit probably is. The promo was to build his upcoming match with Shane Douglas at Slamboree. This was really strange. He says if Russo interferes in the match of Slamboree, then Flair gets 5 minutes with him. But this was like a challenge. He was saying to Russo, like, listen, if you interfere in my match, then I get to have 5 minutes with you. And Russo essentially agrees. Really bizarre. Russo says, I guess this is the part of the show where I'm supposed to be a chicken shit heel, right? Says he would love to have Flair's ass in the ring for 5 minutes and that he will own him. Yeah. Then Lex then tells them to put some respect on Ric Flair's name. Russo says he's happy that Lex survived that fatal car crash known as the Lex Express. That was actually quite a good line. Russo tells Lex that he'll never have a body like his. Russo says that he went through Lex's contract and that Lex does not own Liz. WCW owns Liz. I'm talking about Miss Elizabeth, which means Russo owns Liz. Liz is my property, he says. He tells security to go and bring Liz to him. The security go up to Ric Flair and Lex Luger, but they beat them up. Russo then runs off with Liz in his arms and he gives her to security and they run away with her. And then I guess during the break, we see that the security put Liz in a car and they take off. Whew. This was a super long segment. 10, 20, 100 pounds of crap in a 5-pound bag. They had a bit of everything, something for everyone. They even had you covered, Sam, with their cheap heat in this program.
Oh, yeah, with segment. Cheap location-based heat. Yeah, I was in my element.
Russo, who's from New York, giving the cheap heat, crapping on the town.
Yeah, like you said with last week's episode with the Chris Nowinski and Matt Hardy segment.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same, just the you suck, or sorry, I should say like that was the week before with Hulk Hogan. But insert location here, sucks is just all it takes. So more specifically, when he's in ring, Russo's specific says, and I quote, upstate Rochester is not a part of New York. This dump might as well be Iowa. And the crowd reaction is actually like part cheer and just generally mixed reaction, right? At best. So when, was it Buff Bagwell, right? Says his crony has to break it down and says, what we're trying to say is this place just sucks. And then they boo like crazy. And it's I don't know, just the cheap heat. It has to be really broken down to its constituent parts to work. And then that just proves it. It was funny. What Russo says was kind of too much. It was too verbose. It had to be broken down to, sorry, what he's saying is, your place sucks. And they're like,
What is funny about it is there's so much going on in this. But yet he still felt like, okay, I've got to get some cheap heat.
I've got to get that.
Got to get that as well.
Apart from that, which obviously I loved because I'm a fan of it. My other takeaway from this, and we can go back into details of it just broadly though. Nature Boy giving 100% on the mic.
he was saying so much that I couldn't really note this all down. But when he's like, until you've wrestled Kerry Von Erich in the Texas Stadium in front of 50,000 people, until you've wrestled Bruiser Brody in the Budokan Hall, until you faced Hulk Hogan, like doing this long promo. And what is it like? When you wrestle 40 nights a month and you pack the houses, you jump in a limousine, you party all night, then you jump in the jet next day and you do it all over again. You can't call yourself a man, or something like this. He was just, it's a shoot to Flair and he's just firing the hell up.
Yeah, you can't accuse him of phoning something in.
No.
At all. That was nuts. The usage of the words like mark, shoot, and heel. First of all, is this the first time that's really been happening on wrestling shows, primetime wrestling shows itself? And also, what are your thoughts on that?
In the mainstream wrestling, yeah, this all kind of got brought in with Vince Russo. Like, I think, a lot of these fans would have known these terms, or the more diehard fans known these terms from the magazines and everything else. And Russo's idea obviously was to kind of blur the lines,
yeah,
and get it out there. I personally, you can tell, obviously I'm traditional and old school in my wrestling opinions. Not a fan of it at all, because I just think you're trying to get the biggest audience you can, right? So you start referring to people as heels or marks, or what was the other term you used?
He said something was a shoot. Yeah,
shoot, and it's like, well, saying that's it's very problematic as it goes anyway, because it's like this part's a shoot, so it's like, okay, so this part is the real part of the show. Everything else you've been watching is fake and phony. So if I'm watching that, I'm thinking, well, why should I be invested in all the other stuff earlier?
And the rest of it,
like I feel silly now, but this is the real part of the show. But using these terms, most of the audience, like 95, 98% of the audience at that time especially, wouldn't know what those terms meant. So you're just alienating a big part of your audience just to kind of to blur the lines for the smart fans. But the thing is, you've already got the smart fans watching, so you don't need to really appeal to them in that way. If I watch a Netflix series and I don't really understand it, and I'm just confused, I just switch off. I don't go, oh, what is this? Let me look into this further. I just go, I'm going to find something else to watch. And I'm pretty sure that's what the wrestling audience did, because obviously their ratings were going down and down. So I'm not a fan of that at all, especially the way he says, oh, this is the part where I'm supposed to be a chicken shit heel. It's kind of like, oh, geez. And not only that, but it's not even like, okay, I've got this great idea to help. Not that it's a great idea, but if you believed it was a great idea, oh, I could use this sort of new cutting edge way of talking for this wrestler that I want to get over. But it's just for Russo, who shouldn't really have been a performer in the first place. He was the writer for the show. And now he's on there with all the mic time and having all these angles and storylines revolve around him. Very, very bizarre. This whole thing was just kind of all over the place.
What do you think about that? About Russo being a star of his own show? Sounds like you're not a fan of that either.
Well, I will say this: he's quite a good performer. He's a good talker, and I've met Russo a couple of times and actually really liked him. I liked him a lot. Actually, he's a really nice guy, and I think he is pretty entertaining to watch, and he has a bit of a gift for the gab. So, I mean, you could say this kind of power struggle, it's obviously very similar to the Austin and McMahon program, which had obviously worked so well for WWF, so it's natural for them to want to do it here. Bischoff was the original kind of heel boss, which you could argue that WWF style with McMahon, but it's kind of like, how do all these wrestling companies just suck, where like every company, the boss is a bad guy and just like, runs shot and does what they want. It's kind of like, why would anyone want to be a wrestler? But no, I don't know. I don't really know where I sit on this, but all this work shoot stuff, it end up getting really, really bad. I don't know if you've ever seen the Bash of the Beach, I think it's Bash of the Beach 2000 incident with the work shoot with
Right.
Hogan and Jarrett, where Jarrett lays down for Hogan. It gets real messy, and they're kind of doing this work shoot, but no one really knows who's working and who's shooting, including the performers, and it gets really, really messy. And all that happens is the audience just switches off, and it just hurts WCW more and more. So it's like, it feels like they're just trying to be too clever for their own good. And here's the problem. You've got Vince Russo doing all this stuff. It's kind of like, what's the payoff? Russo can't wrestle a match, which I guess he kind of ends up doing. And he ends up winning the WCW world title at one point as well.
Oh.
Exactly. So it's just like, he put the world title on himself, I guess. Yeah. I don't know if you want to move on, but like, for years, Shane Douglas had been in ECW doing like shooting on everyone pretty much. He did the famous shoot in 1994 when he won the ECW world title. He won the NWA world title and threw it on the ground and proclaimed that he was the ECW champion now, something along those lines. And he got him a lot of heat at the time for throwing it down the NWA title. So Shane Douglas, the franchise, he was very infamous for being a shooter as well. And he, for years, was shooting on Ric Flair, like burying Flair, like for real on ECW. I guess Shane Douglas was in WCW in the early 90s, like very much in the mid card. He was in a tag team called the Dynamic Dudes, two blonde guys that carried skateboards to the ring and were like, we're cool dudes. Very much a sign of the times in the 90s. But then he went to ECW and became like a real I'm not a skateboarder anymore. Like, I'm a hard shooter, shooting on Flair for years. And those two really had some bad blood with each other, really didn't like each other. Flair would bury Douglas on interviews when he was asked about it. He would say, yeah, Douglas to me seems pretty overrated. He just seems like a guy that curses loads on promos and that's it, you know? So years later, Douglas ended up at WCW again after leaving ECW, and naturally they're like, okay, we're going to do Shane Douglas and Ric Flair. So they're pushing that. They're pushing Lex Luger against Shane Douglas here. And I guess Russo's just the top of it. There's a lot going on here. And of course, again, earlier in the show, we had the whole Kimberly Page wants a divorce from DDP. Here, Russo essentially saying he owns Liz and they kidnap her. They've already kidnapped David Arquette, and now they're kidnapping.
Oh, yeah, there's two kidnappings.
There's two. It's like not only was there multiple table shots, multiple table shots,
yeah,
but multiple low blows, multiple afterbirths, so after matches, beatdowns, rundowns. Now there's multiple kidnappings in a 1-2 hour show. This is just way too much. Like you said, Flair tried to salvage it, but I was just like watching this. I was like, can we roll on, please?
And roll on, we shall.
We see David Arquette backstage, and he's selling his injuries, but he tells DDP he's fine. He's good for the match. DDP says, no, you can't do the match. Next up, we see Paisley with the Artist defeat Tammy with Chris Candido in 3 minutes and 22 seconds with a DDT. This show just doesn't get better. Before the match starts, Sunny gets a promo in the ring, and she says she bets everyone is wondering what she's wearing underneath her robe, or more like what she's not wearing. They then play her raunchy entrance music. And she takes off her robe and she's just wearing wrestling gear. The commentators say they're gonna call it like they see it, and they're ready for a cat fight. Yeah, this match, this might be. I mean, it's funny they gave Sting 1 minute, but they gave Tammy, for people wondering, Tammy, she was previously Sunny, real name Tammy Lynn Sitch, and she's wrestling Paisley, who went on to be Charmel, Booker T's wife, who I think before this is Charmel.
That's where I've seen her.
She was just a Nitro gal, and they put her in the match. What's really funny about this is they're saying, so Sunny was never a wrestler in WWE. She was purely a valet. Yeah. And they're saying, oh, Sunny or Tammy has the wrestling experience here in this match. This was just dog ugly.
It was awful. I have a positive thing to say about the match.
Okay.
But it was awful. It was so bad.
You see at one point when she's punching Paisley and just like a foot gap in between her fist and her head. It's so bad. When people talk about the worst matches of all time, this doesn't get any love at all. This was just
Would you put it up there
ugly,
or down there?
With one of the worst matches of all time?
That you've
I think I would.
Be, right?
It was just, it's two completely untrained professionals on a mainstream wrestling company on national television having a match. This should have never have happened. And the fact that they let it go 3 minutes and 22 seconds, this is one of the longer matches on the show. Absolutely bizarre. At the time, Tammy and Chris Candido, they'd left ECW and had come to WCW. They'd left ECW because I guess they got a job in the office and they were helping Paul Heyman out by purchasing flights and stuff. But they were doing it. The idea was they would do it on their own credit card and then Paul Heyman would reimburse them. But the reimbursement never came. So they were like thousands of dollars in debt because Heyman owed them all this money. So they left ECW. They come to WCW. This run only lasted, I want to say, 2 or 3 months. Despite Candido looking in really good shape here, apparently at the time, they were both really, really, their substance abuse issues
strung
really
out,
bad.
yeah.
They're in the height of their substance abuse issues. And I guess in the end, I think Bischoff had to release them from the company because they were just liabilities. And I think we spoke on week 1 of Chillin' With The Villain and we said how good Sunny looked. This is only 2 years later.
2 years.
And she's looking a little rough.
Yeah, this was just hard to watch. Should I get in with my positive just to get it out of the way?
Yeah.
It was a terrible match, and I cannot overstate how bad it was. But so they both have like a male valet, or there's the what was his name? There's Chris Candido, and
so
there
was Chris Candido, and it was Prince Ikea. But here, so Prince Ikea was a wrestler, I want to say from the power plant, but like a smaller wrestler, wrestled for years as Prince Ikea, and then they decided to, again, this is the era where they had to like revamp everyone and give them a new gimmick. They gave him a Prince gimmick, and they called him the artist formerly known as Prince Ikea, and then they later shortened it to the artist. Yeah.
So I've never seen, Sunny or Tammy deliberately throws herself to the outside to knock down, and Chris catches her, but to knock down Chris, who in turn knocks down all of the ring officials. And she did that deliberately so then her man can get in the ring and beat up or attempt to beat up the woman opponent risk-free, which I've never seen before. And I guess you never will again, but that was just something I haven't seen before.
So the moment you're referring to, she does a dive, which is really random. She climbs to the top rope and she jumps on, she does like a diving crossbody to the outside, where pretty much just Chris Candido catches her, but also it's supposed to be on the referee and
but the referees
artist.
Why
was the referee even on the floor?
I can't remember, but it was really random, which made it kind of sold it as she's thought to do that. Oh, here's a spot, so she's going to do this thing. I'm taking it as I thought it was kind of cool. Okay, the ring officials, we've deliberately knocked out the ring officials now, so because I'm not a performer, so my man can do the dirty work, which he doesn't, because then he gets kicked in by Paisley.
Well, I've got this written here. Well, first of all, Heenan says about Candido, he says he's lived a hard life, which I thought was kind of like, knowing what we know like later
too
on
much
with Candido and Sunny and everything else. So Paisley does a low blow on Tammy. So more low blow. She low blows Tammy. Tammy then gives Paisley the stunner. No one should be doing the stunner in this era other than Steve Austin. It just comes across as cheap. Tammy then dives on the men, including the referee. Paisley then low blows Chris Candido. Paisley then does the China backflips.
Okay, please let me please. She does those. Tammy's in the corner. The it's the most tepid handspring I've ever seen, because she the actual thing she does okay.
The
but then she gets
good.
to it and she stops. And I, for a split second, thought that Peacock was buffering. But like, she does the thing and she stands up adjacent to Tammy, and then just stops. And then they just have to like pretend like, oh, okay, bang. And it was awful.
But the funniest thing is she does the backflips and just like basically stops and kind of slightly falls backwards
Just
into
gingerly,
Sunny.
like,
It looks terrible. And the commentator is like, it's like silent for a second, then they just go, whoa. Had to
Made it
react,
even
like,
more, yeah.
whoa. Like, it was so bad. It was almost like she did the backflips and she was so proud of herself for doing the backflips that
She did a stop and look at
that
me,
she
yeah.
had to do the back elbow. I wondered, I was
Yeah.
like, I wonder if Sunny was supposed to hit her as she was coming and just like forgot. But either way,
Oh, maybe. But, oh, God.
it was so bad. So she did those backflips into nothing.
She did the hard bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the easy bit, she absolutely fluffed it.
Right. And then Tammy straddles. Sorry, Tammy gets crutched on the top rope, and the commentating line does say this as Tammy straddles the steel turnbuckle, and then I want to say Sunny goes for a Northern Light suplex on Paisley, and she reverses it into a DDT to put us out of our misery. We think it's over, but then Chris Candido and Tammy, of course, jump them after the match and celebrate. So why did you put Paisley over in the first place? Ooh, this was just
Rough. Super rough.
I will say this. Chris Candido is a hell of a performer. Really, really good wrestler. And he never really got a chance in the mainstream companies. You know, he was in Smoky Mountain for a few years. Then he was in the WWF as the Body Donners with Tom Pritchard, and his name was, I want to say, was it Skip or Zip? He was either Skip or Zip. Really, really not good. Never really got a chance to, climb the card. Went to ECW, kind of found his place and was putting on some really good matches. And then here he came to WCW, but obviously WCW was just a wreck at the time. But he is actually, I don't know if you noticed, he was the Cruiserweight champion during this segment. And I just think, damn, if he could have been the Cruiserweight champion just a few years, 2 or 3 years previous to this, it could have been awesome. Like him as a Cruiserweight champion having matches against the likes of Eddie and Psychosis and Rey Mysterio, Ultimate Dragon, even Juventud Guerrero, Kidman, all these guys, Dean Malenko. Dean Malenko versus Chris Candido. That is actually a dream match that I've never even thought of. It probably actually did happen. I'm sure it probably happened in ECW or happened somewhere, but that could have been awesome in ECW. But he was stuck in ECW, didn't come here till later, and by the time he got to WCW, is just too far. Having problems with his demons, and the whole story of Chris Candido is really sad. Do you know the story of Chris Candido?
No.
So I want to say in 2005, he's trying to get clean, I want to say, and he does a TNA show, or pay-per-view actually, and like breaks his leg. I might be getting the facts wrong with this, but had surgery on it right away, and then you're not supposed to fly, and he got like a blood clot, and it ended up like being the death of him.
Oh, geez, really? I didn't know. Oh, wow, crazy.
Yeah, it's really sad, really sad.
Right. But like not too long after this, where we see.
Yeah, he died young. We're talking
feeble,
about all these wrestlers on this show.
Dying young.
Died young. Yeah, he died in 2005, April 2005. Yeah, so really, really sad. Yeah, he dislocated his ankle in the steel cage match. He underwent surgery the next day. On April 28th, 2005, Candido felt ill and his condition worsened during the day. He collapsed in the evening and was rushed to the hospital. He was diagnosed with pneumonia. Candido died soon afterwards. He was 33 years old. His brother, Johnny Candido, initially believed that Candido died due to a blood clot, but he later on revealed that he did not die from a blood clot, but rather an acute, is that how you say it, pneumonia brought on by his surgery. So I wasn't necessarily right the first time, so I'm glad I fact checked it. But yeah, big fans of Chris Candido here on Chillin With The Villain. So hopefully one of these shows we'll actually get to see him wrestle. We're going to have to review some ECW at some point.
Oh, I'd be up for that for sure. For sure.
We figured we'd do the shows that the more mainstream stuff for our earlier episodes, but we do want to do a deep dive into everything, guys. So if you're waiting for us to start reviewing ECW or even Ring of Honor or TNA or all this other stuff, we'll get there. But we're only in week 3 and we're only just scratching the surface of WCW. So don't worry, guys, we'll get there.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like some people will want us to get obscure, and I feel like you would as well. So it's going to happen.
We've gone from 2 like amazing shows to this one, which is
the complete opposite. But like, still, can we just thanks Vince, but can we still say still incredibly entertaining?
Oh, you don't get bored.
Like, yeah.
You
yeah,
never
there's
get
never
bored
a
during
dull
the show.
moment.
No.
You're not allowed.
I watch some
He made
TV
sure of that. Yeah.
I watch some TV shows now, and I'm just like, so like nothing happens. Like this is going
Honestly,
completely
man,
other
that's
way.
worse. Like,
Yes,
being
I
boring
agree.
is worse than being bad, I think.
I agree. I think this is obviously way too much. This is obviously his philosophy is more, and it's exhausting. But it's still 10 times better than nothing happening. 100%. 100%.
It was never boring. Yeah, you can never accuse it of being boring.
Can we move on from this hideous affair?
Please.
Backstage pre-tape with Booker T. Booker T promotes the Slamboree match he's got coming up with Scott Steiner for the US title. Major Guns turns up and wants to give Booker T some pointers. She wants to ask him some questions. She asks him about Mike Awesome.
Oh, Major Guns.
Booker T says Mike Awesome straight off the independent circuit. And that's pretty much all that I wrote down for this segment. Wasn't a whole lot to
Nothing
it.
to say. Yeah.
I think they're just trying to get some more sex appeal on the show. And that was obviously one of Russo's thing to get sex appeal on the shows. And does a lot of it. The women are actually, it's funny because the women years later kind of felt like they never got the TV time and stuff that they wanted back in the day. It's like they were actually really, really represented in terms of like time on the show. They're
Screen
all
time.
over the
Yeah,
show.
they're
Screen
prevalent.
time.
Yes.
Prevalent.
Yes.
But obviously it's not doing what they want to do, which is wrestle and stuff. But they are on the show and they are in like major spots, you know? And I actually think a lot with wrestling now, I feel like WWE does this pretty well, but I think like back then, if you watch here in WCW and they did this in WWE as well, like they were really good at having the women's division and the men's division interact with each other. And I thought that was really important to do. And here they do it really well. I feel like now they don't really do that as much. They're kind of like separate entities.
They are very segmented, aren't they? Yeah.
Right. But like if you watch Friends, you want to watch, there's the women and there's the guys, but you want to see them interact with each other, right? It's not like two separate. I think they're kind of missing that a little bit these days. So, but anyway, I digress. We see DDP and David Arquette backstage, and Arquette is still selling his ribs. Arquette says he knows that he can take Bischoff. Next up, Mike Awesome defeats Booker T in 5 minutes and 11 seconds with the Awesome Bomb. Scott Steiner comes out and does commentary. He's with Shakira and Madeja. After the match, Steiner puts Booker in the Steiner recliner, and the MIA come out and make the save. Okay, Mike Awesome and Booker T. They get 5 minutes here, so it's a long one.
Yeah, the thing I want to say is always the thing that happens right at the end. I didn't like how close he got to the bottom rope when he did his Awesome Bomb. It scared the crap out of me.
It was always a wonder to me when I was younger how Mike Awesome didn't become a bigger star than he was. Because see this guy who's really big,
He's
really
huge,
athletic, really athletic, really strong, and can do a lot of really cool things, and had a certain intensity to him. You could argue sort of lack of charisma, but I saw he was pushed to the moon in ECW, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I thought it was awesome. Years later, or becoming a wrestler and seeing things now through a different sort of eyes of a wrestler, I can see now how he didn't get to the top of WCW, right? He gives Booker T this Awesome Bomb at the end of the match, but it's more like a running razor's edge. And when you bump someone, you want to bump them in the center of the ring. Like in the center of the ring is where the spring is, so it's the easiest bump. You do it around the center, and it's like a much stiffer bump. It's not very nice. So you always want to hit your bumps in the middle of the ring. He just threw Booker T with no care whatsoever, and Booker T pretty much nearly hits his head on the bottom turnbuckle. Yeah. Just looks super duper dangerous. Mike Awesome kind of got over in ECW from just like power bombing people really hard off the top rope, through tables, dropping them on their heads. Like earlier we said he did a dangerous German suplex to Canyon. He kind of threw guys around to get himself over. You look at the top guys in WCW, you think Hogan is going to want to work with this guy, where this guy's gimmick is powerbombing people on their heads? You think Jeff Jarrett would want to work with him? You think Flair, any of these sort of top guys, Sting even, would want to work with this guy? Booker T here, he's climbing up the ranks. He's about to become a massive star. I am positive he was furious with how Mike Awesome threw him like this for the finish.
Yeah, you're quite a safe worker, right? Or that's your ethic.
I'd like to think so.
Well, I know, but I mean, like safety is an important thing, you know, and like protecting
100%.
your partner. And yeah, so his ethic, or whatever you want to call it, it just does not gel with you. We'll put it that way, right? We'll put it nicely.
Well, it's not necessarily that. I'm just saying, like, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't want to be thrown around like that, but no one would, you know.
No, but I mean, when you're performing, you're conscious of, and you mentioned positioning last week and how important it was. Like, you're always conscious of where your opponent is going to land for their sake, right? Like, that's something that's always going through your head.
Dude, like, I'd always say wrestling with me, I'd like it to be, I think the reason why I've been successful in wrestling is because wrestling me is like a night off. It should be for most wrestlers. I wrestle some guys sometimes and I'm like, okay, what are your moves? And like, oh, I do the power bomb on the floor and like the Death Valley driver into the corner and like the top rope brainbuster. I'm like, okay. And they're like, what do you want to do? And it's like, well, I break your fingers. I do a chicken wing where I cuddle you back. I do something where I fake a super kick and then just kick your leg out instead. All my offense, like I'm not breaking the wall too much here, I guess. You know, I'm looking after my guys and I'm getting maximum reactions for like minimum effort. You know what I mean? It's my goal to look after them. And if I had to pick them up and drop them on their head, or I could do something so much more simpler for the same, if not better reaction, I'm clearly going to go for the latter. You know, anyone could pick someone up and drop them on their head. That's not difficult to do, but I wouldn't want anyone to do that to me. So I don't know why anyone else would want to do that. Yeah, I can completely understand looking back how Mike Awesome didn't work out, because when he came to WWE, WWF in the invasion angle, he didn't last very long and he was pretty much a jobber from the get-go. But it's like that act that he was doing in ECW, like he wasn't going to be able to do that in WWE. So
wouldn't get away with it.
No, there were certain characters that only worked in ECW. During this match, again, Mike Awesome just hits Booker T with a chair right in front of the referee, just mid-match.
Yeah.
So apparently Russo, so ECW had like no rules and they just did that. Like there was no rules, no disqualifications. And apparently Russo was a bit of a fan or a mark for ECW. So I guess they're just implementing that here, because it feels like half the matches on this show, there's chair shots mid-match, referee sees it, just like, meh, carry on. It's really lazy booking. Really
lazy. It doesn't work for me. Yeah.
Lazy booking. Because if you can hit someone with a chair, why would you do that from the get-go? It's just so silly. And then Steiner nails Booker T from behind. It's crazy he actually put Mike Awesome here over Booker T. Really, really bizarre.
Yeah. The part of like using a weapon when they're unsanctioned is how are they going to get away with it? Like there's mystery. There's something there to be like, oh, he's not going. Oh, is he going to get that out of the ring before the referee turns? Like, oh my god.
Yeah.
So then they just do it. It's like, okay, it's just another move. What?
Okay. If you don't have rules, you can't really have bad guys. Can you?
No, you have nothing. No, exactly. Right. Yeah, because bad guys break rules.
Right. If you don't set the rules, then it's kind of like there's no bad guys.
It's a free for all. Right? Yeah. You
can't get any heat, can you? It's just like
It's odd.
Next
Booker T's always good though, right? I'm a huge Booker T fan.
Oh, sorry. Maybe we should get into Booker T. Yeah, I think Booker T was probably the only shining light of the late part of WCW or the WCW 2000. I think everything else was just chaotic and everything else, but they did a really good job of building Booker T. I don't know how much this was WCW, but Booker T kind of, he'd been in a tag team for years of Harlem Heat. Then he'd been floating around in the mid card for quite a few years, and it was a slow build to get to that main event spot. I was obviously speaking earlier about Billy Kidman. They're just like, he's a main eventer now, and no one bought it. But the audience watched Booker T climb the ranks. They watch him get better and, come into his own. So it was much more believable once he kind of got into the main event scene. And the fans thought he earned it. He earned it. So he's like the only shining light of this era.
Oh yeah, he's fantastic. So last week we covered Survivor Series 2002. Billy Kidman was there and he was super jacked. He's in this week's episode. He was noticeably leaner, noticeably smaller. Still looks great, but like noticeably smaller. Scott Steiner was in Survivor Series 2002, looking just insanely jacked. Here, 2 years earlier, still looking insanely jacked. He's not like Billy Kidman there. He still looks wild.
I think he looked better here in 2000. He looked insane, I think, in this episode.
He does.
He does the Survivor Series.
He still does. And what I'm saying is like so between those 2 years, he's always looked like a monster.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, most people don't change their bodies drastically in 2
No,
years.
true,
like
but
Billy
that must
Clinton.
be like, yeah, but his physique must be wild to keep up.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure.
It's
I'm sure. It's funny because if you see Scott Steiner in the Steiner brothers, he's still jacked as hell, but he's nothing like what he looks like here, where he's just got veins popping everywhere.
yeah, he just looks like a beefy burly guy. I remember him
Right.
really buff, but yeah, here he just looks almost disgusting. Just absolutely wild. He brings his ring girls down who sit when he's on commentary. They're just like rubbing his muscles and giving him
More sex appeal, more Russo sex
Yeah.
appeal. Next up, we see Salty Brett. So it's a sit-down interview with Mark Madden interviewing Bret Hart from his home in Calgary. And basically, this is just one big, long bitch and moan
bitch fest.
about Hulk Hogan. Brett is not a fan of Hogan. We spoke about these work shoots and the shooting and blurring the lines of reality and work. This all goes back to, I want to say, 1993. So Hogan was a top star for years in the WWF. Then it kind of went to Brett, but it wasn't really supposed to go to Brett. It was maybe supposed to be Lex Luger or whoever else. And Hogan, I guess the idea was that Hogan was supposed to wrestle Bret Hart at 1993 and put Bret over and pass the torch, as you will, to Bret Hart. But for whatever reason, it never happened. Don't know if Hogan didn't want to work with him or it didn't work out logistically. But basically, this whole promo is Bret Hart moaning and being upset that Hogan hasn't put him over in a fake wrestling match. he says Brett, every day he tries to be the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be. But Hogan stopped me from beating him. He cost me what I wanted most, which was to win over Hogan. He says that Hogan only came back while I was injured. It's also worth noting this is 2000, so this is after Bret Hart has taken the kick from Goldberg, which ended up concussing him and ending his career. So at this point, I guess they don't realize that Bret is retired. I guess they later find that out. He says that Hogan's must be afraid of him, asks why two of the biggest names in wrestling history have never had a match. Hogan knows when it comes down to it, or comes down to technical wrestling, Hogan knows that he'll lose. He says that Hogan wasn't willing to pass the torch to him. When it was time, he ran off to WCW. Bret came to WCW for Hogan, says Bischoff promised a match with Hogan for Bret, says Hogan would always turn it down. Bret says that when he writes his columns, I want to say for the Calgary Post or whatever the newspaper is, he can't help but stop and think about Hulk Hogan's face, and he has to stop writing and go and walk and clear his head. He says this is way more personal than anyone knows. He says he will make Hogan pay. He says he wants to go out by tapping Hogan to the sharpshooter. This was an interesting interview.
Not only can he not write his column in peace, there was like a shot of, wasn't he at like an ice hockey game and there was a kid coming up to him or something and like brought it up or something like that and it triggered him.
He says
something like that.
He says he can't go to hockey games anymore because he'll go to a hockey game, someone will ask him how is the wrestling going, and he'll just get so mad and angry because Hulk Hogan exists and hasn't put him over yet.
That's what's the phrase that we can put it in a nice way? He's obsessed.
Obsessed? Why'd you say it like that for? Obsessed? What? I don't get it.
Well, okay, pronounce obsessed.
Obsessed.
Yeah, what's wrong
you
with
said
that?
Like obsessed. I was like, what?
Okay. I'm sorry, but he's
no. You said what's the term we can use for it, and I thought you were going to come out with like an interesting term. You said obsessed. I was like, oh,
I was just trying to emphasize that that's
well, clearly
not normal to have somebody with that sway over his everyday activities.
What is?
Imagine if he pours out his cereal. He's like, I'm gonna have a good day today, and his first thing is he sits down, he pours out his cereal, and out pops a toy of Hulk Hogan.
He can't have anything red or yellow because it just reminds him of Hogan.
Triggers it, yeah.
Do you
He
want
gets he gets his new MasterCard through the mail. And
he can't eat at McDonald's because it's red and yellow. It's like, Hogan.
Yeah, exactly. He goes get a hot dog. He gets a hot dog, and some kids put ketchup and mustard on his hot dog, and he just smashes it out of the kid's hand.
He never let him beat me. He would never let me beat him. Sorry. You know what's really funny about all this? He never got the match with Hogan.
After all of that.
Do you think to this day he's still just... He definitely is. You know what's really funny about Bret? Is that Bret's like my all-time fave, and we know that. We've discussed that on the pod, I'm sure, before.
Yeah.
Salty Bret is a real thing, and every now and then he'll do an interview where he just comes across as so bitter and so salty, and people kind of crap on him for it. I love it. I think it's amazing. When he did that interview where he said he thinks Triple H is a 4 out of 10 wrestler, I just thought it's like so funny. He's like, he did one the other day talking about modern wrestling. Actually, maybe he would like the podcast because apparently
I think he would.
He's not a fan of modern day wrestling, so maybe he'd like the podcast. And actually, I do have beef with Bret Hart because twice Bret Hart put me in the sharpshooter. So, and he never it's funny, he's talking about Hulk Hogan holding him down and Hogan wouldn't let Bret beat him. Well, Bret Hart put me in the sharpshooter, okay? And then 6 months later, he comes up to me on another show. He goes, "Oh, should we do the sharpshooter thing again?" And I'm thinking, I did the favor for you before. Couldn't you come up to me today and say, "Hey, you know what, Marty? I put you in the sharpshooter before. This show, you could put me in the chicken wing." No, it's all about Bret. Let's put you in the sharpshooter. Bret's already retired at this point. I've got a career ahead of me. You'd think they'd want to pass the torch to me. Let me put him in the chicken wing, get myself over. But no. It's all about Bret. So I feel like right now, how Bret felt in this promo in 2000, where he's very angry that Hogan won't let him beat him. That was actually a fun story. It's it's a show for Rev Pro in London in York Hall, and Bret's on the show, and I'm wrestling Tanahashi in the main event, and Bret Hart was supposed to be like the special. I don't know if he was an enforcer or just like the guest of honor, or was going to celebrate with the winner, whatever it was. Realistically, he was brought there to do a meet and greet because obviously a lot of people want to meet Bret and make lots of money. But Bret Hart wasn't scheduled to do anything, definitely wasn't booked to do anything physical. But I think once he saw the show and saw, oh, this is a really good show and the crowd's really, really hot and everything else, he was like, oh, maybe I should do something. He comes backstage. I mean, we're downstairs in the dressing room, and he comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, Marty, do you think we should do the sharpshooter tonight? Do you think I should do the sharpshooter?" And I'm like, yes, like 100%. Then he goes, "Do you mind if I just practice it on you quickly?" And I'm thinking, you're Bret Hart, mate. I think you know how to do the sharpshooter.
You know how to do a sharpshooter by now,
right.
Yeah.
But I'm like, okay. So we're all backstage, and it's funny because all the boys, they're all sat in their chairs with their backs against the wall, and everyone's just like silent, just like watching Bret. And I lay down on my back on the floor of the locker room as Bret kind of grabs my legs and starts to put me in the sharpshooter backstage, while everyone just sits there in silent watching, being like, Marty's getting put in the sharpshooter. So like he gets me in it, turns me over, and he's like, "Yep, all good." And I'm like, cool. Like clearly he'd done it on other shows and people didn't work with him, and he fell over or something else. So yeah, it was. I actually posted the picture recently on my Instagram. It's me in the sharpshooter, and Tanahashi is there, like acting as the referee, and people are like, "This is the most bizarre wrestling picture ever." Bret Hart, Tanahashi, and Marty Scurll. So I'm glad that I got to work with Bret, but it would have been nice for him to return the favor and pass the torch by letting me put him in the chicken wing. Maybe one day I'll get my revenge.
Yeah, you need your revenge. Going back to the Mortal Kombat thing, this is how you get your revenge. Like, we're going to settle this like men online on Mortal Kombat. You just pick the red and the yellow robots. you reckon that happens to him now? Like he goes in and his kids are playing Mortal Kombat like they do. One's Sector is it the red robot, one's Cyrax the yellow robot. And he's just like, right, that's going off now.
Well, the thing is, as well, was like they obviously were planning to do the match here and they end up not being able to do it. But it's like the whole point of the Hogan match, you would have thought, well, I was going to say the story would be better as Hogan is the heel and Bret is the face, but actually maybe not. Maybe Hogan, like Bret was a really good heel, so maybe Hogan is the baby face and Bret as the heel could have been really good. Bret was a really good, as much as I loved him as a baby face, he was a really good heel because he could just tap into that inner bitterness and whine and people would really dislike him. So I enjoyed this interview. I really did, actually. I thought it was a different, nice, unique way of doing it. And he kind of repeated the same point a bunch, but it's definitely better than sometimes I see on TV now. People they'll try and do something like this, but they'll try and get it all done in 1 minute and they'll cut it up and just, at least they gave this some time. It allowed it to register and we really came out of this understanding that Bret does not like Hogan and he's very bitter about this. So I thought it was a good job. This is probably the highlight of the show, actually.
Yeah, actually, it probably
just
was. Right?
Bret moaning about Hogan is the highlight of the show.
I would say his bitching and being bitter it was very kind of true to life to what, if you've ever seen a sit down interview with a real like top level athlete.
Yeah.
Like they do get like that when they're at the top and it's not enough and there's something holding them back and they behave in exactly that way. So it was actually very realistic.
Bret is always criticized for taking himself too seriously, but this is what made Bret and what made him so good. The fact that he treated everything like a shoot and the fact that he treated it all so seriously. This was everything else in this show just didn't seem believable. This you believed. And why? Because it was true. And it was, but it wasn't like, I guess it's kind of like these work shoots and whatnot, but it wasn't like,
it wasn't
earlier,
like wink,
it
wink
wasn't trying
on the
to be
nose,
like,
though.
oh, I'm going to say Mark, I'm going to say heel to get a reaction. It's like, he's just telling his true feelings. So
it wasn't on the nose. It was just more authentic.
It was like you're doing a program with Hogan, so it's just
it wasn't.
Okay,
look at me, how smart I am.
Yes.
I know term. Yeah.
Yes.
Wasn't trying to appeal to anybody.
No, exactly. Okay, Sam, shall we get to it?
Oh yeah.
It is now time for the main event. DDP tells David Arquette that he's not coming. Arquette says okay, but then DDP comes out. And Arquette comes out with him. And DDP doesn't really resist. He's just kind of like, all right then. So next up, the thing you've all been waiting for, the World Championship match. Diamond Dallas Page and David Arquette defeat Jeff Jarrett and Eric Bischoff when the world title was on the line. But David Arquette pinned Eric Bischoff. So David Arquette is the nude. Is the new
Freudian slip.
There's too much sex appeal in this show.
Yeah.
Is the new WCW World Champion. Okay, so we see a replay of TDP winning this title just 3 days ago on Nitro. Kimberly Page. Just so there's more. I haven't stopped, by the way. There's more. Kimberly Page, she comes out. They announce that she's going to be the special guest referee, just to put the odds against DDP. Page won't do the counts properly when DDP covers Jarrett, but when Jarrett covers DDP, she's doing the fast count, typical kind of heel special guest referee stick. Okay, we're getting to the finish. DDP kisses Kimberly Page against her will, and the crowd goes nuts. Then Arquette spears Bischoff. At the same time, Jeff Jarrett hits DDP with the belt. They both cover the respected men. Page is wiped out, knocked out from the kiss. A new referee comes in and he makes a 3 count, but it's not for Jeff Jarrett pinning DDP. It's for David Arquette pinning Eric Bischoff, despite never being a legal man in this match. Didn't make any sense whatsoever. David Arquette's hand is raised as the new WCW champion. The commentators scream, "What does this mean for WCW? What does this mean for the Triple Cage? The Triple Cage was going to happen at Slamboree. It was a match that they did in the movie Ready to Rumble, and they wanted to bring it to life and do a Triple Cage match in WCW. Supposed to be Jeff Jarrett versus DDP, which I was actually very excited for. It's now changed into, well, it later becomes a freeway with David Arquette. DDP celebrates with David Arquette despite just losing his world heavyweight
losing his own
championship.
title. Yeah. And you said he only had it for 3 days?
He won it on the Nitro before this, yeah.
Oh my God. On the Monday.
Yeah.
And he lost it on the Thursday, and they tape it the next day. So
Yeah.
in real life, it would have been the next day for him.
Yeah. This is, so here we go. Ready to Rumble was not doing good business.
Right.
Do you really think that people are going to hear that David Arquette, a 140-pound actor, is the WCW World Champion and think, oh,
I'm going to rush to the theatres now.
I'm going to go watch Ready to Rumble. I haven't watched Ready to Rumble for years, but I have seen it maybe twice, maybe more than that. I think it's one of the worst movies of all time. It's just complete, utter, stupid, not funny. That sort of humor I really dislike. I just don't think it's not funny. It's not silly enough to be funny. It's just not humorous whatsoever. Terrible story. So much. There's no logic, anything else. You don't care about any of the characters. I was very excited when they said they were releasing a wrestling movie. I was very excited, and I was very, very disappointed when this came out. What are your thoughts on Ready to Rumble? I know that we're reviewing this, but I think it kind of goes hand in hand.
Well, I haven't seen it in a long time.
Okay.
I remember really enjoying it. And all I'm going to say is, you mentioned cliffhangers earlier on at the start of this episode. This isn't really a cliffhanger, but I will say I found it is free on YouTube right now.
Okay.
Maybe we'll have to cover it one day, because I'm actually kind of shocked at what you just said. That you hate it that badly, but you didn't say I watched it once many years ago and I remember it badly. You're like, no, I've seen it probably 3 times now and it's still terrible.
Maybe I've not seen it 3 times, but I've must have just seen so many clips and everything.
But you've given it another go. Like, it's not
I've definitely
like
watched it at least twice. Probably watched it when I was young and then watched it. I want to say maybe watched it 3 or 4 years ago just to be like, how does this hold up? Is it good? Is it bad? I think it's funny that you're advertising this as, well, it's free. It's like, well, I'm definitely not paying to watch this movie. I think we should wait till we have a Patreon so I can be paid to watch this movie, because I will need to be paid
before we review
to
it.
Watch this movie. Yes. Let's do that. Once we start a Patreon, once we start a Patreon, spoiler alert, once we start that, then maybe I'll consider reviewing Ready to Rumble, because, oh man, that's going to be a couple of hours of my life, which I'm never going to get back. And it's not even a couple of hours of my life, because then I've got to review it, which might be funny. The review might be entertaining. I'm assuming our review could be much more fun than the Ready to Rumble movie.
Do you know what's really funny is it sounds like a Ready to Rumble episode would be good based on how we are now. What if I watch it for free on YouTube in preparation for that fabled episode, and then we get to record, we hit record, and I'll be like, yeah, Marty, I was off. It'll be like the opposite. It'll be like the opposite Survivor Series episode, where we're both like, yeah, it was good. We'll just be like, yeah, that was awful.
That's it. That's not much more to say.
And we've done it on the Patreon because you wouldn't do it any other way. So we've locked it behind a paywall. Only for people to it's just us just going, yeah, that famously bad movie was bad.
Well, I want to know, is there any fans of Ready to Rumble out there? I would really like to know, because
the comments for it were just, oh my God, I can't believe this is free. This is the best day. But people were really positive on it.
Really?
I'm not kidding. I'm not making that up.
They spent $24 million on this movie.
But what's funny, I know that is nuts, but what is funny is if you search for Ready to Rumble on YouTube, it comes up for free at the top. And we know that the comments are really positive on that. just take my word for it. You know, the comments of people are looking at it and they're enjoying it.
Yeah.
Every other search result is people just dogging on the movie Ready to Rumble. So you've got this gulf where it's like, it just seems to be two camps. There's people who just love the movie for some reason, and then just people who hate the movie, and there's no in between.
So yeah, one interesting thing I just came to my head. So I believe Michael Buffer copyrighted the term "Ready to Rumble." Did you?
The boxing announcer. Yes, he did. Yes.
Right. So I'm reading this now. How much does Michael Buffer make to say "Let's get ready to rumble"? Depending on the match, Buffer earns between 25 grand and 100 grand every time he utters those 5 famous words. But I want to know how much he gets paid royalties, because I think he's made his whole career and business from copywriting Ready to Rumble. And I'm assuming this movie would have had to give him a big payout. Was he in the movie? I think he was maybe in the movie, announcing a wrestling match. Surely.
I can't remember.
Because they used to use him in WCW quite often as well. He'd get paid like $1 million to come do it. I don't know if it's that much. But what a smart man. He copyrighted that and made all this money. But the movie... Oof, there was a video game as well, I want to say, called Ready to Rumble. Is that correct?
Yeah. Not a movie tie-in, by the way.
No,
it was a boxing
this.
game. I believe they had Ready and then like the number 2, and I don't know if that's enough to make them legally distinct.
I don't think
but
so.
I can't imagine it would. Oh no, hang on a minute. He
got paid.
He was the voice on it.
Oh, was he?
Yeah. On the Dreamcast. Okay. Yeah, I think so.
We should probably get back to this match. I mentioned it earlier. Kimberly Page, she's got like these leather pants on. I think when they kidnapped David Arquette earlier, she took his leather pants off.
She borrowed them. Yeah.
She has a thong.
I was gonna say she saw underpants hanging out of the leather pants. It's like that's going to be my look for the final match. Yeah.
There was
who wore it better, Martin?
I wonder. Should I put that on the Instagram? Who wore it better?
As a poll, who wore it better? Yeah, or Kimberly.
I will say this, because we could dog on this forever. Let's do some positives. I'd like to think I'm a very positive person. I don't like all this negativity, so I want to give some positives. At the finish, David Arquette spears Bischoff. Yeah. Bischoff lands in the ropes. Arquette had the, what's the word? Not tenure, because he's not got tenure, but he had the...
Like the smarts to...
Yeah, I was trying to think of a nice word.
He is a real life wrestling fan.
He's a real life wrestling fan, but Bischoff ends up on the ropes. He knows he's got to pin him for the 1, 2, 3. He does grab, I want to say, Bischoff's leg and pull him more into the center to cover him for the clean 3. I feel like a really inexperienced person or a celebrity or anything else, he would have ended up in the ropes. They would have just covered and done the count in the ropes. And I mean, it's WCW, so it's been like, whatever. It's just been one of those things again. Where it's just like,
he cared whatever. More than,
right.
Yeah.
But he cared. Yeah. And he actually had the tenacity or whatever the word is to bring him into the middle. So that I'll give David Arquette major respect for. Arquette, I've met him a few times. Super duper cool guy. He loves wrestling. I don't know if you know this, but years later, I guess this WCW title one, which he knew was a bad idea, I think it'd been haunting him for years because he loved wrestling, but just for years and years, he was looked at by the wrestling community as a joke and looked at as like one of the reasons that killed WCW. So like, it felt like it was a really big weight on his shoulders. So you know that he must have loved wrestling because I think any other celebrity wouldn't care, but to him, it was a really big deal. So he ended up doing a documentary called You Can't Kill David Arquette, I believe, which is also on YouTube, but I think you have to pay for it. So it's one up from Ready to Rumble. I bought it because I was interested in seeing it. And it shows David Arquette on his redemption story. And he goes and does some independence. He does a death match with Nick Gage, which kind of doesn't really go well, to say the least. But this whole little documentary about him coming back to do the independence. And I've seen David Arquette quite a few times at shows, and he seems like a really nice guy. And he actually, I had heard this before, but I just reminded myself whilst I was doing research for this show, all the money that WCW paid him, he donated to the families of deceased wrestlers of Owen Hart's family, Brian Pillman's, Brian Hildebrand, and plus to the wrestler Droz, who was paralyzed due to his in-ring accident. Also, Droz passed away a week or 2 ago. So, rest in peace. Oh yeah, do you not know that?
No, I had no idea.
Yeah, Droz passed away like last week. Yeah.
Oh wow, yeah, no, I had no clue.
Really sad story, but I think that's quite that kind of shows the sort of person David Arquette
Yeah.
is. The fact that he donated the money to, because I was assuming he wasn't rich from all these movies. So the fact that he was getting probably, I assume WCW was paying him something decent, and he donated it all. I think says a lot about David Arquette's character.
I like the notion that he's trying to regain the respect of wrestling fans like the hard way. That's cool.
It is. It's
super cool.
It is really
and
cool.
When was this recorded, or when did he do this? Because he's not a spring chicken now.
He did this in the last like 5 or 10 years, I want to say. In
Okay.
the last, I'm not sure exactly. I think it's been over sort of time doing the odd different match. He came to a Ring of Honor show once, and I was serious. I was like, "You want to work tonight? Like, we could do something. You want to?" He's pretty good friends with Dalton Castle, so he turned up. I want to say once he like bought a cameo from me when I first joined Cameo, and I was trying to work it out. And I'm like, "What is this?" Like, and then I get this request, and I realize that it's David Arquette. He's just sending me money. Like, it was very, very, very funny, interesting chap. But no, I guess we should get into this whole thing. Russo, who booked this, he still defends this, saying he would do it again. It was worth it for the publicity. The publicity really seemed to be, they just got covered in USA Today, which I assume is a massive newspaper. But I'm not a massive believer in all publicity is good publicity. Like, trust me, no, I don't believe that at all. So the fact that you're like, oh, I got like the worst thing we ever did has all this press, I think I don't think that's going to create business. Like, yes, well done, you got in USA Today, but then so like when tragic stuff happened in wrestling, they got covered in newspapers. Like when someone died or something, doesn't mean it's a good thing, does it? Not comparing David Arquette winning the world title to someone died, but you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, totally. And the idea was doomed from the get-go, because if that movie wasn't doing so well, the general audience have already said no. And the more, I don't know what you call it, like a more niche audience, or more like wrestling fans, either have already seen it,
right,
or don't care, or like know that it's bad. So the David Arquette thing, if wrestling fans aren't seeing it or know that it's bad, doing something bad to wrestling in the name of it's just going to make it worse. You're not going to get those guys. The general audience are already not going to go see it. The 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 people who read USA Today and go, what's all this about? We should watch this movie. I can't imagine would even, well, it didn't turn it around, and it wouldn't have anyway. That just seems like a very, not arrogant, but just some people double down and they don't have to. I can't imagine he really thinks that.
Well, I think Vince Russo, he obviously has a lot of ideas and stuff, but I think he underestimates sort of how important a championship can be. I think he just sees, it's just a prop, it doesn't mean anything. It's like, okay, if that's the case, then why does the World Cup final sell out in 2 minutes and sell 100,000 tickets? Do you know what I mean? Why is the FA Cup final this, etc., etc.? When things are more important and there's more on the line, people care, don't they? So you can use that championship as a tool to sell pay-per-views, to sell matches and everything else. But you obviously got to put the thing over as important. So when a 140-pound actor, non-wrestler, wins it, it just completely kills any credibility of your company and just makes it seem all like one big joke. So to do something like this just for press, I think was just very short-sighted, and just like I said, the whole thing just didn't even make sense anyway. The fact that it wasn't even legal, like, I think it's kind of funny that I'm getting hung up on that, but like DDP just looked completely stupid by being happy that he'd lost the championship belt. Like, it was, I don't know. I've always thought it was strange. Never really know where I stood with celebrities in wrestling. It's one of those things where the celebrity comes in wrestling, and I feel like the wrestling fans don't care about the celebrity, right? They don't care. But then I also feel like the fans of celebrity, of the particular celebrity, don't care about wrestling. So unless they're really diehard fans of that particular celebrity, I don't think they're going to tune in to see that. Like, if there's a celebrity I know, I don't know, I can't even think of a celebrity top of my head, but if they're doing something, it doesn't necessarily mean I need to watch it, if that makes sense. I don't really understand the philosophy with bringing celebrities into wrestling. I get that you want the press, I guess, but all in all, like I said, you just kind of piss everyone off because the wrestling fans don't like it. Then the outsiders, they're just not interested, you know?
I think
you either like wrestling or you don't. You either like I very much
true.
Maybe other than okay, here's an example where it did work. The Mike Tyson thing before
Mike Tyson, I was going to say
that worked, but that worked because the product was so good, right? So WCW's product at the time in 2000 was so bad, so they actually wanted to. They should have done the opposite. They didn't want to put eyes on the product, right? Because it's like, oh, people might tune in because they hear David Arquette song, but actually they didn't. Actually, the numbers dropped. But when they tune in, the show's got to be good. Otherwise, it's going to do more damage to your product. When Mike Tyson turned up, people tuned in to see Mike Tyson, but then they saw an amazing show, full top to bottom with amazing talent, and the production was on point, and everything was an all-time high, being really, really good. So people stuck with it. Here, they're going to turn on WCW. We'll just review this show. The tables, the beatdowns, the no rules, everything on this show. You tune in to see David Arquette, the few people that did, and they watch this show, they're going to think wrestling's a complete joke. That's not David Arquette's fault.
No, it's not. I was going to say, well, what about is Mike Tyson an exception? But then you jumped in there like, oh, except for the Mike Tyson, but outside, so we agree on that one.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, what's his name?
Well, also Mike Tyson.
Lawrence Taylor?
Well, Mike Tyson has always say this. It's like, he's an athlete and he was a boxer. And even Lawrence Taylor is an athlete. So them getting involved in the wrestling makes kind of a lot more sense than like a Hollywood actor. Like that's a story. Like, oh, he's going from boxing to wrestling, or he's going from football to wrestling. But when it's just like, oh, this person, like when they do it on Raw,
they're just dragging an actor.
Oh, there's going to be this actor here. It's kind of like, why? You know, like if they're getting involved or something, like what they've done recently, the last few years with Bad Bunny in WWE, and
I think he's
Logan
good.
Paul.
I think he's done a good job.
Oh, he's done great, amazing. Like that stuff I think's amazing. I actually think I could see WWE going that route, that kind of what's it called, the showcase boxing, where they have like celebrities fight each other in a boxing match. I could see
like
that.
The YouTube boxing match.
Yeah, I could see that in WWE. Like if I was WWE, I know it's kind of pushing it, but one of the biggest matches that WWE could do now would be Logan Paul versus Bad Bunny. Imagine you do that. Bad Bunny is super duper duper over. He's huge.
Yeah.
You put him and Logan Paul, huge. You put him against, that could be like the biggest business for WWE in years. You think about that. That would get, you talk about getting press, that would get press all over the world. That'd be insane. Yeah.
He's also doing a good job, like taking it seriously and doing a good job in the ring.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know what you thought, but I thought he did.
Oh, no. Yeah. He did.
Like, he treated it with respect.
Yes.
As a professional wrestler who's gone from the ground up, training for years and years and years, going through the school, learning ropes, all of that to get where you are, what do you think about a celebrity coming in and not winning the belt like David Arquette, but just in general, just getting that free pass? And I thought you were going to go well, I'm old school, you've got to put in the thing, but it seems like you say, no, there's a time and a place for it, and it can be really good.
Yeah, no, I'm not in one of those ones that like, oh, you got to pay your dues and everything else to be in this ring. I don't believe in that. It's at the end of the day, it's a show and it's a business. So absolutely, if it makes sense, then yeah, I'm all for it. I think, like I said, what they've done with Logan Paul and Bad Bunny, and the guy's a commentator on SmackDown sometimes.
Yeah, whatever his name is. Yeah,
he's great. So no, I think it's cool if you can get celebrities involved. I do think it can work, but I think just doing it for the sake of it, like when they had Raw and it was like a different celebrity general manager all the time, kind of just felt a bit like, I don't know if we need this, but it's kind of comes like it's like a talk show or something, rather than a sporting show. But no, just going back to the match, I think David Arquette obviously is an actor, so he did a really good job of selling like, oh, I'm shocked that I won this match. When him and DDP escaped, for some reason, they did the Billy Kidman from last week. They escaped through the crowd and wanted to run through the people. There was these fans just grabbing David Arquette's shirt and like tugging at him, and security had to come in and take it off. I also think when he won the belt, I noticed maybe quite a few drinks getting thrown in the ring as well. So
Yeah, there was stuff being thrown in the ring.
yeah, I think that was kind of commonplace in WCW at the end of the show when people know they can get kicked out. So, but yeah, have you got any more final thoughts on this match, this piece of business?
Not really. I kind of want to move on from it. It wasn't great. I did notice he's not a wrestler. He's got the belt and he puts it around over his shoulder, and then he has to climb that barrier, whatever they're called, the crowd barrier.
Yeah.
If you think about the logistics of that, like that'd be hard to do. Like carrying that, so you've got one arm already gone. You can't use that. And
it would be hard to do.
It would be, wouldn't it? I mean, he managed it. It wasn't too graceful, but that would be kind of tough. And so I just thought, like, it's already Carnage, and he's already got everything stacked against him. It's like, okay, so now you got to now you have a physical hurdle. You've had an emotional one, and do this thing on top. I did notice that the escaping through the crowd thing just seemed a little bit unnecessary. But what is unnecessary at the end of an episode of something like this? The whole thing was unnecessary. So it's just another crazy little cherry on top of this.
I was gonna say, I feel like I've had an emotional, what was the term you used, hurdle watching this show.
Watching it, yeah.
This was the first WCW show that we've covered. I do promise, Sam, in future episodes of WCW, it should or it will be a lot better than this. This is your first taste, really, or at least in many, many years, of WCW 2000. How would you sum up this show or your experience with WCW in the year 2000?
So, okay, yeah, it's terrible. The product's terrible. I understand that, but we said this earlier. It was never boring. You said that with a question mark at the end?
Like no, it was not.
Oh, yeah, no, it wasn't. No, yeah, it wasn't. It was never boring. And we said this. I'd take that. I'd take stupid. I'd take ridiculous over. I would take ridiculously bad over ridiculously boring any day. So I still greatly enjoyed covering it, watching it. It was
agree.
super fun.
We're positive men, huh? We're so positive.
Too positive. Yeah, I know.
Why can't more people on the internet be positive like us? We're so positive. We're just being positive about WCW.
I know that Paisley and Tammy match. Even though I'm like, oh, I found a positive on it. Why did I do that? I'm gonna have to edit that out.
We're so positive. I feel like if we want clicks and views and listens, we need to be more negative, Sam. We just haven't got it in us. We're just too nice.
We're too nice. We'll have to think of something just to say, to go, so people can caption it. That has no context, because people like doing that anyway on the internet. Not our fact. Like, people have been really cool, but on the internet somewhere, we've got to say something very. What can we say? I just can't even think of something because we're so nice. Let's think of something.
You know what will be nice this week? So you're listening to this on a Monday. This week on Thursday will be my birthday. Yay!
There we go. That's fun, isn't it?
It is quite fun. So all I ask for the people that are listening, so we're having a great time on Instagram. That's going really well. We're actually also on TikTok. You don't stop. That's actually going really quite well. Lots of views on there. But we want to grow our YouTube channel. So I'm requesting to you, the podsters, the chillers. We've got to get better names. Give us, what I was going to say, a follow on YouTube, but it's not that. It's subscribe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, putting out content on there. If you could do that as your little birthday gift to me, I would really appreciate that, because we do the podcast and we don't charge anyone to listen to this. Anyone is free to listen to the podcast. We do it for you, the people. We watch shows like this just to entertain you people. So yes, it is my birthday this week, so, say happy birthday to me. Do that, God. I don't want much, do I? Also, I want to say thank you to Heiyoming in Japan. Heiyoming for many years would kind of unofficially sponsor me. They're this cool, boutique-y wrestling clothing brand in Japan. So you've probably seen me. I'm always wearing something of Heiyoming. They've given me so many clothes over the years. A lot of it is kind of luchador influenced, but they sent me this new crossface chicken wing t-shirt. If you can see that, obviously that is the move that I made famous. So
no one else.
Pretty cool. So I'd like to think they made that and they were thinking of me and they were nice enough to send me one. So that's very nice. And just while we're on the talking about merchandise, for years, people have been asking me, when are you going to bring back the Villain jerseys? Well, I have news for you. They're coming back. Boom, dropping it on the pod. So keep your eye on my Instagram because they're going to be exclusive to limited numbers. I don't want loads and loads of jerseys. So we're going to be probably limited to maybe 50, maybe 100, maybe just 50 because I kind of want to make them more, So they're going to be dropping soon. So keep a keen eye on my Instagram. And do we want to reveal what we're doing next week, Samuel?
Yeah, we can do it. Yeah.
Okay. So next week, boom. One of the, what would I say? Most fan appreciated shows of all time, or pay-per-views. Is that the right word?
Yeah, this isn't one that's been requested to us too often, but we know it's a very popular one.
Yes, we're taking it back to 1997,
Mm-hmm.
I believe it is. For
97.
in your house, Canadian Stampede. So I think people are going to really enjoy that. I'm really looking forward to it because basically this is how it's gone. We watched a great show in the Survivor Series. We then watched this pretty terrible show. And I'm like, man, I don't even know if I'm a wrestling fan anymore. We need to watch something good again. So we're going to watch Canadian Stampede and then review it for you people next week. So I hope you're all excited for that.
Yeah, that'd be a nice little palate cleanser. After this, right?
It will be. Sam, do you have anything to plug?
I've got nothing to plug.
Every time you've just got nothing to plug.
Well, one day I'm going to have something to plug, and then you'll be shocked.
I know. I'm looking forward to it.
But I was thinking, should I? Because World of Sport aren't going to have this. I should, like Michael Buffer.
Mm-hmm.
You know how we copyrighted Let's Get Ready to Rumble? We've already stolen it. I should copyright Have a Good Week Till Next Week because World of Sport's not even a thing anymore. And then can I retroactively sue ITV for using my catchphrase?
I don't know if it works like that, but
Okay.
I'm pretty sure my mum got me a book recently, which is about old British wrestling, and I think it's called Have a Good Week Till Next Week. So,
Maybe I can go after then. The publisher.
Do you want to see us out then, Sam?
All right, then. Sounds good. Have a good week. Till next week.
Bye-bye.